My name is Zelda Fayrite, and 3 months ago, I watched my supervisor destroy what she thought was nothing but spreadsheets and meeting notes. She stood behind my workstation, announced to our entire department that my year of effort was worthless garbage, then pressed delete while 23 people stared. What she actually erased was the invisible foundation holding our company together. And when my phone rang 30 seconds later with a $500,000 job offer, I realized she had just handed me the perfect weapon for the most satisfying destruction I could have ever imagined. Before I tell you exactly how watching her panic became the sweetest moment of my professional life, could you please take a few seconds to hit that like button and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will show you how one moment of cruelty can backfire in ways that seem impossible until they happen right in front of you. And trust me, you need to hear every detail of how this unfolded. Let me take you back to where this really started, because revenge stories always begin long before the actual revenge happens. 18 months ago, I joined Pemberton Analytics as a client relationship coordinator. The job description made it sound boring: maintain communication records, schedule follow-ups, track client satisfaction metrics. What they didn't mention was that our company was hemorrhaging accounts faster than anyone wanted to admit, and the previous person in my position had lasted exactly 4 months before quitting without notice. My supervisor, Quinla Brexworth, made it clear from day one that she considered my role unnecessary overhead. She was one of those people who believed business relationships were purely transactional: send invoices, deliver services, collect payments, repeat. The idea that clients might want actual human connection was foreign to her systematic approach to everything. But I saw something different in those first few weeks. When I reviewed our client files, I found page after page of dry communication logs that read like robot conversations. No personality, no warmth, no indication that anyone at our company had ever bothered to learn anything personal about the people sending us thousands of dollars every month. So I started doing something that seemed radical in that environment. I began treating our clients like actual human beings. When Vernon Hutchcraft, who ran a mid-sized manufacturing company, mentioned during a routine check-in call that his golden retriever had just been diagnosed with hip problems, I made a note. 2 weeks later, I followed up asking how the treatment was going. He was so surprised that someone remembered. He spent 20 minutes telling me about his weekend trip to find a specialist veterinarian. When Constance Fairweather celebrated her textile company's 15th anniversary, I sent a personalized message acknowledging the milestone and asking about her plans for growth. She ended up scheduling an additional consultation session that brought in $12,000 of unexpected revenue. These weren't grand gestures or expensive gifts. I simply listened when people shared pieces of their lives, remembered what mattered to them, and followed up in ways that showed I actually cared about their success beyond what they paid us. Quinla never understood what I was doing. She would walk past my workstation and see me typing what looked like casual conversation notes, and I could feel her disapproval radiating across the office space. During our monthly reviews, she would flip through my activity reports with visible frustration. "Why are you spending 45 minutes on calls that should take 15?" she would ask, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "Efficiency metrics show you're processing fewer interactions per hour than optimal." I tried explaining that longer conversations were building stronger relationships, that clients were specifically requesting to work with me on new projects, that our retention rate had improved by 37% since I started personalizing our approach. But Quinla only cared about numbers that fit her spreadsheet formulas. What she didn't realize was that I was building something far more valuable than efficient call logs. I was becoming the bridge between our company and the people who kept us in business. Roderick Yates, who owned a chain of specialty bookstores, started calling me directly when he needed anything instead of going through our main number. He told me he appreciated talking to someone who remembered that he was passionate about vintage mystery novels and that his daughter was studying literature at university. Tempest Livingwell, whose catering business accounted for our third largest monthly revenue, began recommending our services to other companies specifically because she enjoyed our conversations about her weekend farmers market visits and her grandmother's recipe collection. Month after month, I watched our client satisfaction scores climb. while Quinla remained focused on efficiency metrics that completely missed the point. She was measuring how quickly we could process interactions while I was building the loyalty that would determine whether those interactions continued happening at all. The breaking point came during our annual strategic planning meeting. Our CEO, Gideon Ashworth, was reviewing department performance when he mentioned that client retention had reached an all-time high. He specifically praised our relationship management approach and suggested expanding the personal touch strategy across other departments. I watched Quinla's expression shift as the credit for improved retention landed on what she considered my inefficient methods. After the meeting ended, she cornered me near the supply room. "I don't know what kind of performance theater you're running," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "But this company succeeds on professional excellence, not social hour conversations with clients." She assigned me to complete a comprehensive audit of all client interactions over the past year, demanding detailed documentation of every communication, every follow-up note, every relationship-building effort I had made. It was clearly intended as punishment, hundreds of hours of bureaucratic busywork that would pull me away from the actual relationship-building that was driving our success. But I approached the audit project with the same attention to personal detail that I brought to client work. I created intricate records showing not just what communications had occurred, but how those communications had translated into business outcomes. I documented the catering referrals that Tempest had generated, the expanded services that Vernon had purchased after we discussed his company's growth plans, the contract renewal that Broderick had signed early because he trusted our partnership. The finished audit was 53 pages of proof that personal attention to client relationships was directly responsible for over $200,000 in additional revenue. Every casual conversation about weekend plans or family celebrations had strengthened business ties that competitors couldn't replicate with their generic professional approach. I was proud of that audit. It represented not just a year of work, but a year of genuine connections that had transformed how our company related to the people who trusted us with their business, which made what happened next even more devastating. Quinla called an all-hands department meeting on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. She announced that we needed to review our client relationship protocols and that my audit would serve as a case study for discussion. I assumed she was finally ready to acknowledge that personal attention was driving our improved performance. Instead, she directed me to display my audit files on the main conference room screen while the entire department watched. Then she began dissecting every personal note, every conversation detail, every relationship-building effort as evidence of unprofessional boundary violations. "This is exactly the kind of inefficiency that undermines our service standards," she declared, scrolling through months of careful documentation. "Personal chit-chat about pets and hobbies has no place in business communications. These files represent a complete failure to maintain appropriate professional distance." I felt heat spreading across my neck as 23 coworkers watched her tear apart work that had generated significant revenue for our company. She was presenting my greatest professional accomplishment as a cautionary tale about what not to do. But then she did something that crossed a line I never expected her to cross. She pulled up the file containing my complete audit database, every client note, every relationship detail, every conversation record that proved how personal attention was driving our business success. Her finger moved toward the delete option while she continued talking about the need for professional standards. "This entire approach is garbage," she announced, her hand hovering over the deletion command. "Beginning today, we return to efficient, professional client communication protocols." And then she clicked delete. I watched a year of relationship building disappear from the screen. 53 pages of documented connections that had generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, gone in one vindictive moment. The silence in the conference room was absolute as everyone processed what had just happened. Quinla turned away from the screen with a satisfied expression, clearly expecting me to accept this humiliation and start rebuilding my work according to her preferred methods. But she had made one crucial miscalculation. While she was destroying my documentation, she hadn't destroyed the actual relationships I had built. The clients who trusted me, who called me directly, who had shared personal details about their lives and businesses. Those connections existed in their hearts and minds, not in our computer files. And apparently, Some of those connections had been paying attention to our company dynamics more carefully than anyone realized. My phone started buzzing before Quinla had finished explaining her new efficiency protocols. The caller ID showed Marlowe Partners, a consulting firm that had recently formed when 3 former colleagues left to start their own company. I stepped out of the conference room to take the call, my hands still shaking from watching my work get deleted in front of everyone. "Zelda," said the voice on the other end, "we've been watching what's happening at Pemberton, and we want to talk." The conversation that followed would change everything. Marlowe Partners had been tracking our client retention improvements, and they knew exactly who was responsible for the relationships that kept major accounts happy. They had been planning to approach me for months, but watching Quinla destroy my audit files had convinced them that timing was perfect. "We're prepared to offer you $500,000 annually to join our team," they said, "plus equity participation and complete autonomy over client relationship strategies. We believe personal attention is the future of business consulting, and we want you to build that future with us." $500,000. More than double my current compensation, working for people who valued exactly what Quinla considered worthless inefficiency. But the most beautiful part of their offer wasn't the money. "We know you can't bring proprietary information from Pemberton," they continued, "but we also know that client relationships are built on trust and personal connection, not on database files. If you choose to join us, and if clients choose to work with someone they trust, rather than staying with someone who treats them like transaction numbers, that's simply the natural consequence of different business philosophies." I understood immediately what they were suggesting. They weren't asking me to steal clients or violate any legal agreements. They were simply pointing out that if I left Pemberton and clients decided they preferred working with someone who remembered their dog's health problems and their daughter's college plans, that was their choice to make. When I walked back into the conference room, Quinla was still lecturing about professional efficiency standards, while my former coworkers stared at their hands or notebooks, clearly uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. She noticed my return and paused her presentation. "Do you have questions about our new communication protocols?" I looked around the room at people I had worked alongside for 18 months, then at the blank screen where my audit had been displayed before being destroyed, then back at Quinla's expectant expression. "Actually," I said, "I have something to announce." What happened next would become the most satisfying moment of my professional life, but I want to save that for the next part of this story, because the revenge that followed was so perfectly orchestrated by Quinla herself that you need to hear exactly how her own actions created the domino effect that brought down everything she thought she was protecting. The beauty of what unfolded wasn't that I planned some elaborate scheme to hurt her or the company. The beauty was that by deleting my relationship-building work, she had just eliminated the only thing keeping our biggest clients from walking away. She thought she was deleting inefficient documentation. What she actually deleted was the foundation of customer loyalty that took a year to build and could disappear in a matter of weeks. And when my phone rang with that $500,000 offer, I realized she had just handed me the key to the most elegant revenge possible, simply letting natural consequences unfold while she watched everything she thought she controlled slip away forever. "I'm resigning from Pemberton Analytics, effective immediately," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "I'll be joining Marlowe Partners as their Director of Client Relations." The conference room went completely silent. You could hear the air conditioning unit humming in the background and someone's pen clicking nervously against their notepad. Quinla's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion, then to something that looked almost like panic. "You can't just quit in the middle of a department meeting," she stammered, clearly thrown off by this unexpected development. "There are protocols, notice requirements, transition procedures." "Actually," I replied, pulling out my phone to show the contract offer I had just received. "My employment agreement allows for immediate resignation in cases of hostile work environment or professional misconduct. Having my work deleted in front of colleagues while being publicly humiliated qualifies on both counts." Gideon Ashworth, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any hasty decisions." But I was done with private discussions and diplomatic solutions. Quinla had chosen to humiliate me publicly, so she would get to experience the consequences just as publicly. There's nothing to discuss, I said, gathering my personal items from the conference table. My decision is final. I'll submit formal resignation paperwork within the hour. As I walked toward the conference room exit, I could feel 23 pairs of eyes following my movement. Some of my coworkers looked shocked, others looked impressed, and a few looked like they were reconsidering their own career choices. Quinla called after me, her voice higher than usual. You're making a huge mistake. Marlowe Partners is a startup with no proven track record. You're throwing away job security for some fantasy about relationship building being more important than professional standards. I paused at the doorway and turned back to face her. We'll see which approach proves more valuable. Within 24 hours, I had cleaned out my desk, completed exit interviews, and started my new position at Marlowe Partners. Their office was smaller than Pemberton's, but filled with energy and excitement about building something innovative in the consulting space. More importantly, I was finally working with people who understood that business relationships were built on genuine human connection, not efficiency metrics and standardized communication protocols. But the real validation of my decision came in the weeks that followed, as I watched the natural consequences of Quinla's actions unfold with devastating precision. I hadn't reached out to any Pemberton clients. I hadn't made sales calls or sent recruitment messages. I simply updated my professional profiles to reflect my new position and continued being the same person who had spent a year building authentic relationships with people who needed consulting services. The first call came on Thursday morning, 3 days after I started at Marlowe Partners. Vernon Hutchcraft, the manufacturing company owner whose golden retriever I had asked about during routine check-ins, called my new office number directly. Zelda, he said, I heard through the professional network that you've moved to a new firm. I wanted to congratulate you and ask about your new company's capabilities. We talked for an hour about his business needs, his expansion plans, and yes, his dog's improved mobility after the specialist treatment. By the end of the conversation, he had scheduled a consultation meeting to discuss transitioning his account to Marlowe Partners. The second call came that same afternoon. Constance Fairweather, whose textile company anniversary I had celebrated, wanted to discuss her upcoming project needs with someone who understood her business philosophy. I've been working with consulting firms for 12 years, she told me, and you're the first person who ever made me feel like my company mattered beyond the invoice amount. If you're offering the same personal attention at your new firm, I'm interested in making a change. By the end of my first week at Marlowe Partners, I had received calls from 6 former Pemberton clients. Not because I had solicited them, but because they preferred working with someone who treated them as individuals rather than account numbers. Meanwhile, back at Pemberton Analytics, Quinla was starting to realize what she had actually deleted when she destroyed my relationship-building documentation. I heard about her growing panic through mutual connections in the professional community. Apparently, she had tried to reach out to major clients for routine check-ins, only to discover that many of them were no longer interested in continuing their contracts. When she called Vernon Hutchcraft to schedule his quarterly review, he politely informed her that he was exploring other consulting options and would not be renewing his annual agreement. When she contacted Constance Fairweather about upcoming project needs, Constance explained that she had found a consulting partner who better understood her business values. One by one, the clients I had spent a year building relationships with were making the choice to work with someone who remembered their personal details, their business challenges, and their individual communication preferences. Quinla had believed that client loyalty was tied to Pemberton's brand reputation and service quality. She was discovering that client loyalty was actually tied to the personal connections that made people feel valued and understood. The third week after my departure, I received a call that made everything clear about how devastating Quinla's decision had become. Broderick Yates, the bookstore owner who had started calling me directly instead of going through Pemberton's main number, wanted to share some information that he thought I should know. Quinla called me yesterday, he said, asking if there were any service issues that might explain why I was considering other consulting options. When I told her I was following you to Marlowe Partners because I valued our personal connection, she actually argued with me about it. He laughed, but not in a way that suggested he found it amusing. She told me that professional relationships should be based on service quality, not personal chit-chat about books and family. She said I was making an emotional decision instead of a business decision. Can you believe that? She was lecturing me about how I should choose my own consulting partners. That phone call revealed everything about why Quinla's approach was failing so spectacularly. Even when faced with the evidence that personal relationships were driving client decisions, she couldn't adjust her philosophy. She was still trying to convince people that efficiency metrics mattered more than feeling valued and understood. By the end of my first month at Marlowe Partners, 14 former Pemberton clients had either switched to our firm or initiated conversations about potential transitions. These weren't small accounts. They represented over 60% of Pemberton's annual revenue. I wasn't actively recruiting them. I was simply being available when they called, remembering details about their lives and businesses, and providing the same personal attention that had built our relationships in the first place. Marlowe Partners was thriving beyond their most optimistic projections, while Pemberton Analytics was experiencing the worst client retention crisis in company history. The most satisfying part wasn't the money or the professional success, though both were incredible. The most satisfying part was knowing that Quinla had created this entire situation herself through her stubborn refusal to value what clients actually wanted. She could have supported my relationship-building approach. She could have learned from the improved retention rates and client satisfaction scores. She could have recognized that personal attention was generating measurable business results. Instead, she had chosen to publicly humiliate me and delete work that represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in client loyalty, apparently believing that her efficiency-focused philosophy was more important than actual evidence of what worked. 2 months after my departure, I heard through professional networks that Gideon Ashworth had called an emergency board meeting to address the client retention crisis. Pemberton Analytics was facing the possibility of layoffs, reduced operations, and potentially selling to a larger firm to survive the revenue loss. Quinla, who had been so confident about her professional standards and efficiency metrics, was now scrambling to explain how the company had lost most of its major accounts within 8 weeks. According to sources who were still working there, she had initially tried to blame my departure for the client defections, arguing that I had somehow poisoned client relationships or violated ethical standards to steal accounts. But the timeline didn't support her accusations. Clients weren't leaving immediately after I resigned. They were leaving after attempting to maintain relationships with Quinla's new efficiency-focused approach and discovering that they preferred working with people who treated them as individuals. The board investigation revealed exactly what I could have told them months earlier. Clients choose consulting partners based on trust, communication quality, and feeling valued, not on how quickly their calls get processed or how efficiently their concerns get categorized. Quinla had spent a year dismissing relationship building as inefficient social hour conversation, and now she was facing the consequences of that philosophy in the form of client defections that threatened the entire company's survival. 3 months after my departure, I received the call that made this revenge story complete. Gideon Ashworth contacted me personally to discuss what he called a potential partnership opportunity. He wanted to know if Marlowe Partners would be interested in acquiring Pemberton Analytics' remaining client accounts and possibly hiring some of their staff during what he described as a strategic restructuring process. The company that had considered my relationship-building approach inefficient garbage was now hoping to sell their remaining assets to the firm that had been built on exactly the principles Quinla had rejected. During our conversation, Gideon mentioned that they were also reevaluating leadership approaches in their client relations department. Reading between the lines, it was clear that Quinla's position was no longer secure. "I have to ask," he said toward the end of our call, "what would it take to bring you back to Pemberton as Director of Client Relations? We're prepared to offer significant compensation increases and complete autonomy over relationship management strategies." The irony was incredible. 3 months after watching my work get deleted in front of my colleagues, I was being recruited back to implement exactly the same approach at a much higher salary, with complete authority over the department that had rejected my methods. But I had no interest in returning to work for people who had only learned to value my approach after losing millions of dollars in revenue. "I appreciate the offer," I told him, "but I'm very happy with my current position. Marlowe Partners understood the value of personal client relationships from day one, rather than having to learn it through crisis. 6 months after leaving Pemberton Analytics, I was promoted to senior partner at Marlowe Partners with equity participation and responsibility for expanding our client relationship philosophy across multiple service lines. The clients who had followed me from Pemberton became the foundation for our most successful year in company history. Meanwhile, Pemberton Analytics underwent the strategic restructuring that Gideon had euphemistically described. They laid off 30% of their staff, sold their largest office space, and ultimately merged with a competitor who valued efficiency metrics over personal relationships. Quinla was not retained during the merger. I learned about her departure through LinkedIn updates and professional network conversations. According to former colleagues, she had spent her final months at Pemberton trying to rebuild client relationships using the same impersonal approach that had caused the crisis in the first place. She apparently never understood that the problem wasn't her communication skills or technical knowledge. The problem was her fundamental belief that business relationships should be purely transactional. The last update I heard about her situation came from a mutual professional contact who mentioned that she was having difficulty finding comparable positions because her most recent role had ended during a major client retention crisis. Potential employers were understandably concerned about hiring someone whose management approach had contributed to such significant revenue loss, especially in client-facing roles where relationship building was considered essential. I felt no pleasure in hearing about her career difficulties. My satisfaction came from knowing that the principles she had mocked and rejected were now recognized throughout our industry as essential for sustainable business success. Every consulting firm was investing in personal client relationship strategies. Every professional development program emphasized the importance of treating clients as individuals rather than transaction sources. Every successful consulting practice prioritized exactly the approach that Quinla had considered inefficient garbage. She had been wrong about what clients valued, wrong about what drove business success, and wrong about the importance of personal connections in professional relationships. And her wrongness had been revealed not through elaborate schemes or calculated attacks, but simply through allowing natural consequences to unfold after she chose to publicly destroy work that represented the foundation of customer loyalty. The most elegant revenge is always the kind where your enemy defeats themselves through their own actions, and you simply have to step aside and let their poor decisions create the destruction they deserve. Today, 2 years after watching my audit files get deleted in front of 23 colleagues, I'm running the client relations division for one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in our region. Our success is built entirely on the principle that Quinla rejected, that business relationships thrive when people feel valued, understood, and personally connected to their service providers. Every day, I get to work with clients who appreciate having their birthdays remembered, their family updates acknowledged, and their business challenges addressed with genuine personal investment in their success. And every day, I'm reminded that the best revenge against people who undervalue your contributions is simply proving them wrong through your continued success elsewhere. Quinla thought she was deleting inefficient documentation when she destroyed my relationship-building work. What she actually deleted was the only thing preventing her professional world from collapsing around her. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is just letting people experience the natural consequences of their own terrible decisions while you build something better somewhere else. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had someone undervalue work that you knew was important, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes the best therapy for professional betrayal is sharing stories with people who understand what it feels like to have your contributions dismissed by people who should know better. And if you enjoyed hearing about how deleting my files became the beginning of Quinla's professional downfall, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about workplace revenge that writes itself when you simply let incompetent managers face the consequences of their own poor judgment. The boardroom temperature seemed to plummet as Gregory stood, adjusting his Italian tie with manicured fingers that had never known a day of actual work. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, his voice carrying that practiced authority that had charmed investors for years, "I regret to inform you that we have uncovered significant financial irregularities." My pen froze mid-note. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. After a thorough internal audit, We've discovered approximately $4.3 million has been systematically diverted from company accounts over the past 16 months. The projector hummed to life, displaying complex spreadsheets highlighting transactions in angry red. My transactions. My signature. Gregory's eyes found mine across the table. Ava has been quite clever, using her position as chief financial officer to authorize these transfers through multiple channels, disguising them as routine vendor payments. 22 faces turned toward me in perfect synchronization. I recognized the expressions cycling across their features. Shock, disappointment, disgust. The board members I'd worked alongside for 7 years now looked at me like I was a stranger. That's absurd, I managed, my voice embarrassingly thin. We have the transaction records, Ava. Gregory's voice hardened as he clicked to the next slide. Your electronic signature appears on every authorization. The room blurred around me as photos appeared on screen. A beachfront property in Malibu, a yacht docked in Newport, luxury cars, none of which I owned or had ever seen. This is preposterous, I said, standing so quickly my chair toppled backward. I've never seen these things in my life. Gregory smiled thinly. The properties are held under shell companies registered to your late mother's maiden name. Quite thorough. My mother's name. The air vanished from my lungs. Security is waiting outside, Gregory continued. The authorities have been notified. This company has zero tolerance for theft, especially from someone in a position of trust. The board chairman Harold, a man who'd personally recruited me from business school, wouldn't meet my eyes. Ava, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. As if summoned, 2 security guards appeared at the doorway. My legs wouldn't move. This couldn't be happening. Wait, I said, desperation cracking through my voice. This is a mistake. I can prove. Take her credentials, Gregory instructed. Clear her office under supervision. As hands gripped my arms, I locked eyes with Gregory. The smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth betrayed him. A flicker of satisfaction, there and gone in an instant. And suddenly, I understood everything. I hadn't touched those accounts, but I knew who had, and why today, of all days, they needed me gone. The Singapore acquisition, I whispered, the pieces falling into place. The deal I'd questioned last week, the numbers that didn't add up, the urgent board meeting scheduled for tomorrow that I was suddenly uninvited to. Gregory's smile faltered for just a millisecond. You'll regret this, I said quietly, as they escorted me out, past shocked colleagues who pretended not to see me, past my team who couldn't meet my eyes. My career was over, my reputation destroyed, and somewhere, a clock was ticking on a financial disaster I alone had seen coming. I had exactly 24 hours to save everything or lose it all forever. If you're invested in finding out how I turned the tables on the people who tried to destroy me, hit subscribe now. Trust me when I say what happens next changed not just my life, but exposed a conspiracy nobody saw coming. Like this video to help others find this story, and drop a comment with what you think I should have done in that boardroom. My name is Ava Merritt, and until yesterday, I was the youngest CFO in the history of integrated dynamics. I'd built my reputation on attention to detail and an almost supernatural ability to spot financial inconsistencies. My colleagues called me the bloodhound behind my back, a nickname I secretly loved. I grew up watching my single mother work 3 jobs to keep our lights on after my father abandoned us. While other kids played, I learned to balance checkbooks and stretch dollars. I graduated top of my class on scholarships and worked twice as hard as my privileged peers. When Harold recruited me 7 years ago, it felt like validation of everything I'd sacrificed. I declined higher-paying offers because Harold promised something more valuable, a seat at the table where decisions actually happened. And I'd earned it. 3 successful acquisitions, a complete digital transformation of our financial systems, and navigating the company through a recession without a single layoff. Until yesterday, when it all vanished in 17 minutes. Standing on the sidewalk outside our gleaming headquarters, personal items in a cardboard box like some corporate cliché, I tried to think clearly through the shock. Gregory had been planning this for weeks. The question was why. My apartment felt foreign when I returned. I'd spent so little time there in recent months that dust had gathered on surfaces. The silence was oppressive. My phone, unsurprisingly, remained silent. No calls from colleagues questioning my innocence. No texts of support. I paced, trying to organize my thoughts. Gregory had fabricated evidence against me. That much was clear. But the timing wasn't random. The Singapore acquisition was scheduled for final approval tomorrow, a deal worth over 200 million that I'd been questioning. The financials didn't make sense. The target company showed revenue growth that contradicted market trends. Their asset valuations seemed artificially inflated. I'd requested additional due diligence last week, which Gregory had dismissed as unnecessary caution. I needed proof, but all my access was gone. My computer, emails, files, everything seized. Almost everything. 3 months earlier, after noticing unusual patterns in our quarterly reports, I'd begun keeping offline backups of key financial documents. Not because I suspected fraud, but because the discrepancies nagged at me like a hangnail. Small but persistently irritating. I retrieved the external drive from inside a hollowed-out economics textbook on my shelf and plugged it in. If Gregory thought I would go quietly, he had catastrophically misjudged the situation. The data was there, thousands of files documenting every transaction for the past year. I began cross-referencing the transactions Gregory had accused me of authorizing. 4 hours later, my dining table was covered with printouts and my eyes burned, but I had it. The signatures on the fraudulent transactions were mine, but the authorization codes were subtly different from my personal code. Someone with administrative access had created a shadow authorization that looked identical at first glance. Only 3 people had that level of access: myself, Gregory, and our IT director, Jensen. I needed to know which one, and I needed leverage. My phone rang, startling me. Unknown number. Hello? Don't say my name. The voice was barely above a whisper. I'm calling from a burner phone. They're monitoring everything. I recognized the voice immediately. Layla, my assistant for the past 3 years. I don't have much time, she continued. They're clearing your files as we speak. Gregory called an emergency board meeting for 7 a.m. to fast-track the Singapore vote. My heart raced. Layla, I need you to listen to me, she interrupted. Jensen came to me after you left. He thinks his security credentials were used to create the fake authorizations. He's scared. They have something on him. Where is he now? That's why I'm calling. He was supposed to meet me an hour ago with proof. He never showed. His wife says he never came home. Ice spread through my veins. This was bigger than simple fraud. There's something else, Layla whispered. I overheard Gregory on the phone. He mentioned something about making the problem permanent if you start digging. The threat hung between us. Be careful, Ava. These people aren't who we thought they were. The line went dead. I sat motionless, my mind racing through possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. This wasn't just about framing me anymore. If Jensen had disappeared. A sharp knock at my door jolted me back to reality. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in dark suits, their postures rigid and official. Ms. Merritt, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to ask you some questions about the financial irregularities at Integrated Dynamics. My breath caught. Gregory was moving faster than I'd anticipated. I had seconds to decide, answer the door, and try to convince them of my innocence, without evidence, or... The back window of my apartment led to a fire escape. In movies, people always escape down fire escapes. In reality, the metal groaned under my weight, every step threatening to wake my neighbors. As I descended into the alley behind my building, rain began to fall, because apparently the universe wasn't content with merely destroying my career and framing me for crimes I didn't commit. Where does someone go when they can't go home? When every electronic transaction could be traced? When the only proof of your innocence is on a hard drive in your handbag, and you have less than 12 hours before a corporate catastrophe unfolds? I had one person left who might help me, someone outside the corporate world, someone who owed me. My former college roommate, Delia. Getting across town without using rideshare apps or credit cards proved challenging, but 2 hours and one very understanding cab driver later, who accepted my watch as payment, I stood on Delia's doorstep, soaked and shivering. The door swung open to reveal Delia in paint-splattered overalls, her curly hair wild around her face. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern in an instant. Ava, what happened to you? I need your help, I said, my voice breaking. And I need you to believe me when I tell you I didn't do what they're saying I did. Delia didn't hesitate. She pulled me inside, away from prying eyes and the relentless rain. Whatever you need, she said simply. But first, dry clothes and coffee. As I changed into borrowed sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, I caught my reflection in Delia's bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked nothing like the confident CFO who had walked into that boardroom yesterday. This woman had wild eyes, and a hunted expression. But something else burned there too. Determination. They had taken my reputation, my career, and now threatened my freedom. But they had made one critical error. They thought I was alone. They thought I was beaten. They thought I would run. But they had never really known me at all. Because while Gregory was planning to destroy me, he forgot the most important detail. I never start a fight, but I always finish it. And dawn was coming. Delia's apartment was everything mine wasn't. Colorful, cluttered with half-finished art projects, alive. She listened without interruption as I explained the situation, spreading my evidence across her paint-stained dining table. "So this Gregory framed you for embezzlement to stop you from blocking this Singapore deal?" she summarized, examining a spreadsheet. "And now your IT guy who might have proof has vanished?" "That's the short version," I confirmed, rubbing my temples. "The Singapore company's financials are fabricated. Someone's pushing this acquisition through knowing it's worthless." Delia's expression hardened. "And now the FBI is involved?" "Ava, this is serious. Like, witness protection serious." "I can't run," I said. "I need to stop this deal and clear my name." "With what army? You said yourself the entire board believes you're guilty." I pulled up the files on Jensen I'd downloaded before losing access. "Not the entire board. Harold recruited me personally. If I can get concrete proof to him before the meeting, the same Harold who wouldn't meet your eyes when they accused you," Delia challenged. Her words stung because they were true. Harold had said nothing in my defense. "I don't have a choice," I insisted. "The meeting's at 7 a.m. That's," I checked my watch, 9 hours from now. After that, it's too late." Delia sighed heavily. "What exactly do you need from me?" "Your computer, your phone, and possibly your car." I hesitated. "Also, you can't tell anyone I'm here." She nodded without hesitation. "Done. But you need sleep. You look like you might collapse." "Sleep can wait." I opened my external drive on her laptop. "First, I need to find Jensen." 3 cups of coffee later, I'd pieced together enough fragments to see the outline of what Gregory had done. The fraudulent transactions creating my embezzlement had begun 6 months ago, exactly when Gregory had first proposed the Singapore acquisition. "Look at this," I told Delia, highlighting a section of code. "The security authorization has Jensen's digital signature, but the timestamp shows it was created at 2:14 a.m. on a Sunday. Jensen coaches his daughter's soccer team every Sunday morning. He's religious about his sleep schedule. So someone used his credentials without his knowledge?" Delia asked, squinting at the screen. "Exactly, and I'm betting Jensen figured it out." I pulled up his personnel file. "His wife's name is Diane. I need to talk to her." At 3 in the morning, that won't seem suspicious at all. She was right, but time was evaporating. I'll have to risk it. Delia's ancient sedan smelled like turpentine and coffee as we drove through the sleeping city. Jensen lived in a modest suburban neighborhood 30 minutes outside the city center. The houses were dark except for porch lights. "This is it," Delia whispered, pulling up across the street from a blue 2-story with a basketball hoop in the driveway. "Wait here," I instructed. "If I'm not back in 15 minutes, leave. Don't get involved further." "Like hell," Delia replied. 10 minutes, then I'm coming in." The porch steps creaked under my weight. I hesitated, then knocked softly. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. A light flicked on upstairs. Moments later, the door cracked open to reveal a woman with sleep-disheveled hair and reddened eyes. "Diane?" I asked. "I'm Ava Merritt. I worked with Ryan." Her eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with suspicion. "The police are looking for you." "I know. I didn't do what they're saying." I lowered my voice. "And I think Ryan might be in danger because he knows that." Her hand trembled on the door. "Ryan called me yesterday afternoon. Said he needed to retrieve something from the office." He sounded scared. Her voice cracked. "He never came home. Did he mention what he was looking for?" She shook her head. "Just that it was in the server room, that it would fix everything." "The server room, of course. Physical access logs couldn't be altered remotely." "Diane, has anyone unusual contacted you?" Asked about Ryan. 2 men came by yesterday evening. Said they were from company security, looking for Ryan for an emergency system issue. Her expression darkened. "But Ryan had texted me earlier, warning me not to tell anyone from work where he was. So I said I didn't know." "Smart man. Did Ryan keep backups of his work? Anything at home?" She hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "In his workshop, he's paranoid about system failures." Diane led me through the sleeping house to a converted garage. Ryan's workspace was meticulously organized. labeled storage bins, color-coded cables. He keeps an air-gap system for security testing, she explained, pointing to a computer in the corner. Completely disconnected from any network. The machine booted quickly. Password protected. Do you know his password? I asked. Diane shook her head. He changes it weekly. Some security protocol. I studied the login screen. 3 attempts before lockout, most likely. I couldn't afford to guess wrong. What's important to him? I asked. Something meaningful he might use. His daughters, Hannah and Lily. They're 7 and 9. Diane picked up a framed photo from the desk. Jensen with 2 gap-toothed girls on his shoulders at what looked like a carnival. I typed, Hannah Lily 2023. Access denied. I examined the photo more carefully. They were at an amusement park. Behind them, a roller coaster. What's his favorite activity with the girls? I asked. Sunday morning pancakes, she answered without hesitation. It's their tradition. Sunday pancakes. The screen remained locked. 1 attempt left. I noticed a whiteboard calendar on the wall. In the current week, 1 date was circled in red, April 15th, tax day, but something told me that wasn't it. What's April 15th? I asked, pointing. Diane's expression softened. Our anniversary, 15 years this month. Anniversary, 15 April. The screen unlocked. Thank you, I breathed. Diane hovered anxiously. Will this help find Ryan? I hope so, I said, already scanning folders. A directory labeled ID Backup contained dozens of encrypted files. Most required additional passwords, but one folder stood out, SG, questions. Inside were screenshots of emails between Gregory and unknown recipients, discussing the Singapore acquisition. The language was carefully vague, but one exchange made my blood run cold. Concerns from finance debt becoming problematic, particularly AM. Handle it before final approval. Permanent solution preferred. Understood. Evidence being arranged. Board won't question once presented. Jensen had captured proof of the conspiracy, but there was more. Detailed analyses of the Singapore company showing massive discrepancies between reported and actual revenues, fabricated client lists, non-existent assets. And then I found it, a video file dated yesterday afternoon. I clicked play. Jensen's face appeared, pale and nervous. If you're watching this, I'm probably in trouble. I discovered Gregory using my security credentials to authorize fraudulent transactions under Ava's name. He's been setting her up for months. The Singapore deal is completely fraudulent. The company's basically worthless. Gregory and 3 board members are getting massive kickbacks through offshore accounts. I've downloaded the server access logs showing who accessed the financial systems and when. It proves Ava couldn't have done this. I'm going to the office to retrieve the physical backup tapes as additional proof. If I don't make it back, the video cut off abruptly. Oh God, Diane whispered. I copied everything to my drive, hands shaking. Diane, you need to go somewhere safe. Your parents, maybe? Just until this is resolved. What about Ryan? I wished I had a comforting answer. I'm going to find him. But first, I need to stop this acquisition and clear both our names. As we left the workshop, headlights swept across the front of the house. A black SUV pulled to the curb. Get down, I hissed, pulling Diane away from the windows. 2 men in dark suits emerged, walking purposefully toward the house. Back door, Diane whispered, leading me through the kitchen. We slipped out just as knocking echoed from the front. Crouching behind shrubs, we made our way toward Delia's car. Get in, I told Diane once we reached the sedan. You're coming with us. Delia accelerated smoothly away from the curb as the men reached the back door of Jensen's house. Who were they? Delia demanded. Either actual FBI or Gregory's people. Either way, bad news. I turned to Diane. Call your daughter's school. Say they're sick today. Then call a friend or relative outside the city. What are you going to do? Diane asked, clutching her phone. I checked the time, 4:47 a.m., just over 2 hours until the board meeting. I'm going to find your husband, I promised. And then I'm going to take Gregory down. Back at Delia's apartment, I organized the evidence into a coherent narrative. The Singapore company was essentially a shell, its assets primarily intellectual property that had been wildly overvalued. The acquisition would pump $200 million into an essentially worthless entity, money that would disappear into offshore accounts connected to Gregory and 3 board members. So it's just straight-up theft, Delia summarized. Corporate theft on a massive scale, I confirmed. and they needed me gone because I was asking too many questions. I had the evidence. What I didn't have was a way to present it. Walking into the board meeting was impossible. Security would stop me at the door. Sending the files electronically would be dismissed as desperate fabrications from a fugitive embezzler. I needed someone inside that room, someone the board would listen to. Harold, I murmured. The chairman who didn't defend you? Delia asked skeptically. He recruited me, mentored me. I pulled up his contact information. He was shocked yesterday. Not complicit, shocked. You can't just call him. His phone is probably monitored. She was right. But Harold had one well-known habit. He swam laps at the downtown athletic club every morning at 5:30, before heading to the office. I need to borrow some more clothes, I told Delia, and then I need you to drive me downtown. The athletic club's side entrance was accessible with a key card, but the early morning cleaning staff often propped it open while taking out trash. Delia confirmed this was the case as she drove past. This is insane, she said, circling back. You're going to get arrested. Only if I fail. I checked my appearance in the visor mirror. With Delia's workout clothes and a baseball cap pulled low, I looked nothing like the professional CFO everyone was searching for. I'll text you when it's done, I promised, slipping out of the car. The service entrance was indeed propped open with a trash can. I slipped inside, navigating service corridors I'd glimpsed during corporate events. The locker rooms would be to the left, past the massage rooms. The women's locker room was empty. Through the wall, I could hear the rhythmic splash of a solitary swimmer. Harold always used the pool when it opened at 5:30, swimming exactly 20 laps before showering and dressing for work. I sat on a bench near the connecting door, counting the minutes. At precisely 5:55, the splashing stopped. Minutes later, Harold emerged from the men's locker room, hair damp, briefcase in hand. He froze when he saw me. Ava? He whispered, glancing around nervously. What are you doing here? The police are looking for someone who stole millions. I finished. I know, I need 5 minutes to show you why that's not me. His posture was rigid with tension. This isn't appropriate. You should turn yourself in. Get a lawyer. In 3 hours, you're going to vote on the Singapore acquisition. I interrupted. Before you do, you need to see this. I handed him the flash drive. Everything's there. The real financial state of the Singapore company. Proof that Gregory and 3 board members are receiving kickbacks. Evidence that my signature was forged on those transactions. Harold stared at the drive in his hand. These are serious accusations. They framed me because I was asking questions. Jensen from IT discovered the forgery. Now he's missing. I met his eyes steadily. You recruited me 7 years ago because you said I had integrity. I'm asking you to believe that now. His expression gave nothing away. You realize I have to turn this over to the authorities. After the board meeting, I countered. That's all I ask. Look at the evidence. Stop the acquisition. Then do whatever you think is right. Harold slipped the drive into his pocket. I can't promise anything. That's all I'm asking for. A chance. I stepped back. One more thing. Jensen might be in danger. The server room access logs will show when he was last at the office. Harold's eyes narrowed slightly. You think Gregory would? I think $200 million makes people do terrible things. I turned to leave, then paused. I trusted you for 7 years, Harold. I'm trusting you now. I slipped out the same way I'd entered, texting Delia to pick me up 2 blocks away. As she pulled up, my burner phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Found something in Jensen's files. Meet at the diner on 4th. Come alone, D. Diane had found something. This could be the final piece we needed. Change of plans, I told Delia. Drop me at Rosie's Diner on 4th Street. Delia frowned. That's in the opposite direction from my place. Diane found something in Jensen's files. This could be what we need to find him. I'm coming with you, Delia insisted. No, I said firmly. You've risked enough. Drop me off and go home. I'll contact you when it's safe. She reluctantly agreed, navigating through increasingly heavy morning traffic. As we approached the diner, something felt wrong. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a black SUV with tinted windows. Just like the one at Jensen's house. Drive past, I instructed sharply. Don't stop. What's wrong? Delia asked, but complied. That's not from Diane, I realized, staring at the message again. She doesn't have this number. Only you do. So who? It's a trap, I said, the pieces falling into place. Gregory must have found my burner phone number somehow. The board meeting was starting in less than an hour. Harold had the evidence, but would he act on it? I couldn't be sure. I needed a backup plan. Take me to Integrated Dynamics, I decided. The company headquarters? Are you insane? Delia exclaimed. That's the first place they'll look for you. Which makes it the last place they'll expect me to go, I countered. Plus, I need to find Jensen. If he went to the server room and never came out, Delia looked horrified. You think he's still there? After all this time? There's a server room sub-basement that only IT and executives can access. If something happened to him there, nobody would know. This is crazy, Delia muttered, but turned toward the downtown financial district. As we approached the gleaming tower of Integrated Dynamics, I spotted town cars and luxury vehicles pulling up to the main entrance. Board members arriving for the emergency meeting. Drive around back, I instructed, the loading dock. Delivery trucks were making their morning rounds, creating just enough activity to provide cover. I spotted what I was looking for, Mira from the mailroom, taking a cigarette break by the service entrance. Stop here, I told Delia. If I'm not out or you don't hear from me in 2 hours, go to the police. The actual police, not company security. Tell them everything. Ava, thank you, I said, squeezing her hand. For believing me. I slipped out and approached Mira, keeping my head down. She startled when she recognized me. Ms. Merritt? They said you stole money. I know, it's not true. I met her eyes. Mira, I need your help. People could get hurt if I don't get inside. She hesitated, glancing around nervously. I could lose my job. I'm trying to save the company, I said simply. Please. Something in my expression must have convinced her. She stubbed out her cigarette and held the door open. The security cameras? I know where they are, I assured her. No one will know you helped me. Inside, I navigated service corridors I'd memorized during a security review last year. The executive floor would be crawling with security, but the server room sub-basement was accessed through a separate elevator that required special clearance. Clearance I no longer had, but I knew someone who did. I texted Layla, need your help. Server room access. It's about Jensen. Her reply came almost instantly. Security everywhere. Gregory called another meeting. Something about you contacting Harold. My heart raced. Harold was acting on the evidence, but Gregory was moving to counter it. Emergency stairwell. 5 minutes. I texted back. The service stairwell was deserted this early. I waited, counting seconds, wondering if I'd put too much trust in Layla's loyalty. The door opened. Layla slipped in, looking terrified. You shouldn't be here, she hissed. They're saying you threatened Harold, that you're dangerous. It's lies, I said. I gave Harold evidence proving Gregory framed me. That's why Gregory's panicking. She twisted her access badge nervously. What do you need? Server room access. I think Jensen might be there. Or evidence of what happened to him. Her eyes widened. You think Gregory hurt him? I think $200 million makes people desperate, I repeated. Will you help me? She unclipped her badge and handed it to me. It won't get you all the way in. You need IT clearance for the server cage itself. I'll figure that out, thank you. Layla hesitated. Ava, be careful. Gregory seems different today, like he has nothing to lose. Those were the most dangerous kind of people. I took the service elevator down to sub-level 3, Layla's badge granting me access. The fluorescent lights hummed in the silent corridor leading to the server room, a fortified glass enclosure containing the beating heart of Integrated Dynamics digital infrastructure. The outer door beeped green with Layla's badge. Inside, row after row of blinking servers generated a steady white noise, an artificial breeze. The inner cage required IT credentials. I approached the security panel, mind racing. Jensen would have changed his password regularly, but like many IT professionals, he might follow patterns. His anniversary had worked on his home computer. I tried. April 15th. Access denied. I thought about what else might matter to him. His daughter's birthdays? Hannah Lily, 709. Access denied. One more attempt before a security alert would trigger. I stared at the keypad, thinking about everything I knew about Jensen. Then I remembered he'd once mentioned that his first computer was an Apple II he received on his 12th birthday, the start of his passion for technology. Apple I-12. The lock clicked open. Inside the cage, the noise from cooling fans was almost deafening. I navigated through the narrow aisles, searching for the backup storage systems, where Jensen would have gone for the physical evidence. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then, in the farthest corner, a maintenance panel stood slightly ajar. It led to a crawl space housing additional cooling infrastructure, normally only accessed during quarterly maintenance. I pulled it open wider. Jensen lay crumpled in the narrow space, blood matted in his hair, face ashen. For a horrible moment, I thought he was dead. Then I saw the slight rise and fall of his chest. "Jensen," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside him. "Jensen, wake up." His eyelids fluttered. "Ava," he croaked. "How did you?" "Save your strength," I told him, checking his injuries. The head wound had stopped bleeding, but he needed medical attention. "We're getting you out of here." "The tapes," he mumbled, gesturing weakly toward a small black case partially hidden beneath his body. "Got them. Proves everything." "You're a hero, Jensen," I told him, retrieving the case. "Now we need to get you to a hospital." "Can't move well," he admitted. "Been drifting in and out, dizzy." "Who did this to you?" His expression darkened. "Gregory caught me in here. When he saw what I had, he just snapped. Hit me with something. Thought I was dead, I guess." The pieces aligned perfectly. Gregory had assaulted Jensen, hidden his body where no one would look, then framed me for financial crimes to distract from the acquisition fraud. "The board meeting is happening right now," I told him. "Harold has evidence, but these backup tapes will seal it." I helped Jensen to his feet, supporting his weight as we shuffled toward the exit. Every step was agonizingly slow. Jensen was barely conscious, his arm heavy across my shoulders. As we approached the outer door, voices echoed from the corridor outside. "Check every level. She has to be in the building somewhere." Gregory's voice. And he wasn't alone. We froze. The server room had only one exit. We were trapped. The server hum suddenly seemed deafening as I searched desperately for options. Jensen's weight against me grew heavier as his consciousness faded again. "In here," I whispered, dragging him toward a maintenance closet nestled between server banks. The cramped space barely fit us both. I pulled the door closed, leaving it open a crack to monitor the situation. Through the sliver, I watched as Gregory entered with 2 security guards. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated. Tie loosened, hair disheveled, eyes wild. "Search every inch," he commanded. "She has to be here somewhere." "Sir, the board is waiting," one guard reminded him. "Mr. Lambert said the meeting cannot proceed without you." Gregory's face contorted. "Harold can wait. Finding Merritt is the priority." As they moved deeper into the server room, I realized we had minutes at most before discovery. Jensen's breathing had grown labored, his skin clammy against mine. "Jensen," I whispered, "I need you to stay with me." His eyes fluttered open. "The backup drive," he mumbled. "Back panel. Emergency protocol." I gently propped him against the wall and examined the black case he'd retrieved. The back panel slid open to reveal a small red button labeled Emergency Data Broadcast, Jensen's insurance policy. In case of catastrophic security breach, this would transmit the server's critical data to backup locations. "Where does it send the data?" I asked. "Everywhere," Jensen whispered. "Board members, executives, compliance team. Can't be stopped once triggered. An all-points digital flare. If I pressed that button, every scrap of evidence would simultaneously reach everyone who mattered." I heard Gregory's voice growing closer. "Check those cabinets. Every hiding place." It was now or never. I pressed the button. A small light blinked green, then steady red. Whatever was happening, it was invisible to the naked eye. Data flowing through fiber optic cables to recipients throughout the company. Gregory's phone chimed. Then another chime from one of the security guards. Then another. "What the?" Gregory checked his screen, his face draining of color. "No, no." The server room door burst open again. Harold stood there, flanked by 2 police officers in tactical gear. "Gregory Allen," one officer announced, "you're under arrest for financial fraud, assault, and attempted murder." Gregory backed away. "This is absurd. I'm the victim here. She's the one who—" "We have the evidence, Gregory," Harold said quietly. "All of it. The Singapore financials, the kickbacks, the faked transactions in Ava's name. And now, apparently," he glanced at his phone, "server logs showing you entered this room at the exact time Ryan Jensen's badge was used, followed by no exit scan for Jensen." Gregory's expression shifted from disbelief to cold calculation. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket. "Don't," Harold warned. But Gregory was beyond warnings. He pulled something from his pocket, not a weapon, but a small device with a single button. "Remote deletion trigger," Jensen gasped beside me. Master override. Gregory's thumb hovered over the button. Without the server data, it's just her word against mine. And I still have 3 board members who'll back me. Drop it now, an officer commanded, weapon raised. I burst from the closet, supporting Jensen. It's too late, Gregory. The emergency broadcast protocol already sent everything. The board has it, the police have it, it's over. Gregory's eyes locked with mine, hatred burning in them. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. Instead, he laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You have no idea what you've done, he said softly. None of you do. He dropped the device and raised his hands as the officers approached. As they handcuffed him, Harold rushed to us. Jensen needs medical attention, I explained. Gregory attacked him when he discovered the fraud evidence. Harold called for paramedics while the police led Gregory away. As he passed me, Gregory paused. This isn't over, Ava, he whispered. Some things can't be undone. A chill ran through me despite the server room's warmth. Within 20 minutes, the basement had transformed into a scene of organized chaos. Paramedics attended to Jensen, while police technicians secured the server room as a crime scene. I sat on a chair someone had brought, answering a detective's questions about the events of the past 24 hours. Diane arrived, rushing to Jensen's side as they prepared to transport him to the hospital. The relief in her eyes when she saw him alive spoke volumes. You found him, she said, gripping my hand. Thank you. He saved himself, I corrected. And probably the company, too. As the immediate crisis stabilized, Harold approached. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. The board meeting has been indefinitely postponed, he informed me. 3 members have recused themselves pending investigation. The Singapore acquisition is dead. And my situation? I asked cautiously. Cleared, effective immediately. The police have dropped all charges based on the evidence. He hesitated. Ava, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned Gregory's accusations more thoroughly. You did when it mattered most, I said simply. Harold nodded, then sighed heavily. There's something else you should know. Something we discovered in the data Jensen recovered. His expression made my stomach tighten. What is it? The Singapore company wasn't just overvalued. It doesn't actually own the intellectual property it claimed. The medical research they supposedly developed. He paused. It was stolen from a small research lab. Tests were falsified, approvals fabricated. I stared at him, processing the implications. So, if the acquisition had gone through, we would have invested millions in treatments that don't work, Harold confirmed. Treatments that would have gone to market under our name. The weight of it hit me. This wasn't just financial fraud. Patients would have suffered, died, potentially. All for Gregory's profit. There's more, Harold continued reluctantly. The FBI has been investigating similar fraud schemes across 3 pharmaceutical companies. They believe Gregory's part of a larger network. The scope of the conspiracy expanded in my mind. No wonder Gregory had been so desperate. What happens now? I asked. The company faces months of damage control. But you, Harold straightened. The board members who weren't involved want you back. As acting CEO, the offer stunned me. Acting CEO? Harold, I'm a CFO. You saved this company from disaster, he interrupted. You have the financial expertise to navigate the aftermath. And most importantly, you have integrity. He smiled faintly. Something we clearly need more of in the executive suite. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Delia, checking in. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over me in a wave of delayed exhaustion. I need time, I told Harold, to think, to sleep, to process all this. He nodded. Take what you need. The offer stands. As I finally left the building, through the front door this time, reporters gathered outside, shouted questions. Police kept them at bay. As I slipped into a waiting car Harold had arranged. The driver had instructions to take me anywhere I wanted. I gave him Delia's address, then changed my mind. The Harborview Hotel, I decided. I need a room no one knows about. Sleep claimed me almost instantly once I reached the anonymity of the hotel room. I woke 14 hours later to dozens of missed calls and messages from Harold, from Delia, from journalists seeking comments, from former colleagues offering support. One message stood out, from Layla. They found Gregory's offshore accounts, 40M already transferred, 3 other board members implicated, FBI searching their homes. Call me. I ordered room service and watched the news coverage unfold on the television. My name had been cleared publicly. with anchors describing how I had uncovered a massive fraud scheme and risked everything to expose the truth. Gregory's arrest photo showed a different man than the polished executive who had destroyed my reputation just days ago. His eyes vacant, posture defeated. 2 days later, after proper rest and consultation with the company's legal team, I accepted Harold's offer, with conditions: a complete executive reorganization, new compliance protocols, and most importantly, a commitment to transparency with employees, shareholders, and the public about what had happened. My first day back at Integrated Dynamics was surreal. Employees who had averted their eyes during my disgrace now offered smiles. Congratulations. I recognized the fair-weather nature of corporate culture but accepted their overtures professionally. Jensen recovered from his injuries and received a promotion to Chief Information Security Officer. His experience had transformed him more serious, more vigilant, but proud of the role he'd played in exposing the truth. The investigation expanded weekly. Gregory's scheme reached further than anyone had initially suspected, implicating executives at partner companies, research falsification at labs, bribery of regulators. Through it all, I maintained a professional demeanor, focusing on stabilizing the company and preserving jobs. Externally, I was the picture of corporate leadership, decisive, forward-looking, unruffled by the chaos we'd weathered. But privately, something burned within me. Gregory had nearly destroyed me, not just professionally, but personally. The terror of those hours as a fugitive. The doubt I'd seen in colleagues' eyes. The knowledge that he would have let Jensen die alone in that server room. Justice through the legal system seemed insufficient. Gregory would serve time, certainly. His reputation was ruined, but he had accomplices who might escape serious consequences. The legal process could take years, with appeals and deals reducing sentences. 3 months after taking the CEO position, I requested a meeting with Gregory's attorney to discuss a settlement for the company's civil claims. I explained. The prison visiting room was stark and impersonal. Gregory appeared in standard-issue clothing, the designer suits and Italian ties replaced by institutional monotony. But his eyes still held that calculating intelligence. "This is unexpected," he said as he sat across from me. "Harold sending the new CEO to negotiate." "Harold doesn't know I'm here," I replied calmly. "This is between us." Curiosity flickered across his face. "I'm listening." I placed a thin folder on the table. 3 things you should know. First, the investigation has uncovered 2 additional accounts in Belize, holding approximately $12 million. Accounts the authorities don't yet know about. His expression remained neutral, but his fingers twitched slightly. Second, your ex-wife contacted our legal department yesterday. Apparently, you transferred certain assets to her before your arrest. Assets she's now concerned may be seized. A muscle tensed in his jaw. Third, we've located the researcher whose work was stolen by the Singapore company. She's prepared to testify about threats she received when she attempted to expose the theft. Gregory leaned forward. "What exactly do you want, Ava?" "Complete cooperation. Names of everyone involved in the scheme, regardless of position or influence. Details of every falsified test, every patient put at risk." He laughed humorlessly. "And what do I get in return? A slightly smaller cell? You get to keep those accounts in Belize. We'll ensure your ex-wife retains certain assets. And most importantly," I met his gaze directly, "you get the knowledge that you've finally done one right thing in your miserable career." "Why would you offer me anything?" he asked suspiciously. "You won." I stood, gathering my materials. "This isn't about winning, Gregory. It's about justice. For the patients who would have received ineffective treatments, for the researchers whose work was stolen, for Jensen, who almost died doing the right thing." I moved toward the door, then turned back. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, those accounts in Belize will be much harder for you to access. Ever." As I walked away, he called after me. "You've changed, Ava. The woman I knew wouldn't make deals with criminals." I paused without turning. "The woman you knew died in that boardroom when you destroyed her reputation. I'm someone else now. Someone who understands that sometimes justice needs a little help." 2 days later, Gregory's attorney contacted our legal department. His client was ready to cooperate fully. The information Gregory provided led to 37 additional arrests across 3 countries. Executives who had believed themselves untouchable found themselves facing federal charges. Researchers who had falsified data were exposed. Regulators who had accepted bribes were dismissed and prosecuted. The pharmaceutical industry faced a reckoning unlike anything since the thalidomide scandal decades earlier. New oversight committees were formed, testing protocols were strengthened, patient advocacy groups gained unprecedented access to research data. And through it all, I led integrated dynamics through the storm, emerging as an unexpected champion of corporate ethics. The press called it a remarkable redemption story. Harvard Business Review published a case study on crisis leadership. Only I knew the complete truth, that sometimes justice wears a respectable face and carries a designer handbag. That revenge isn't always loud and violent. Sometimes it's patient, methodical, and perfectly legal. 6 months after Gregory's cooperation agreement, I visited him one final time. "I kept my end of the bargain," he said, looking considerably older than when I'd last seen him. "Yes," I acknowledged, "and the industry is better for it. Those accounts in Belize," he said carefully. "My attorney hasn't been able to access them." I smiled slightly. "There were never any accounts in Belize, Gregory. That was a test, to see if you were motivated by self-interest or genuine remorse." The blood drained from his face. "You manipulated me." "I learned from the best," I replied, standing to leave. "Goodbye, Gregory." As I walked through the prison corridor for the last time, I felt the weight of the past months finally lifting. The company was thriving under new ethical guidelines. Patients were protected by strengthened regulations. Jensen had recovered completely and was rebuilding security systems from the ground up. And I had discovered something about myself, that integrity doesn't mean allowing injustice to prevail. Sometimes it means becoming the architect of accountability. When systems fail, the woman who had stood shocked and disbelieving in that boardroom was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid of the shadows where truth sometimes hides. It wasn't the revenge I had initially imagined. It was better, more complete, more just. Because the ultimate revenge wasn't Gregory's imprisonment or the exposure of his co-conspirators. It was the transformation of an entire industry, the protection of countless patients, the creation of systems that would make such fraud nearly impossible in the future. I had turned his attempt to destroy me into something that would save lives, and that was a victory worth every moment of pain. If this story showed you anything, it's that justice sometimes requires courage from unlikely places. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe in standing up for what's right, even when the cost seems too high. What would you have done in Ava's position? Let me know in the comments below. "Junior staff in the back," Beth called out, waving her clipboard like a royal scepter. "Senior team members up front where they belong." I watched as newer hires, some barely 3 weeks into the job, strutted to the front rows. My 3 years of 60-hour weeks and the algorithm that doubled our client base apparently meant nothing. The photographer adjusted his tripod while I squeezed between 2 interns in the last row, practically hidden behind a forest of heads. "Perfect," Beth chirped, her voice honey-sweet. "Those in leadership positions, please center yourselves." My cheeks burned as Dave, hired 6 months ago but friends with Beth's nephew, took center position. Dave, whose contribution to our latest project involved rewriting my code and somehow making it less efficient. The flash went off 4 times. "That's a wrap," the photographer announced. I thought that was the end of it, just another day of being invisible. 2 weeks later, our CEO, Gray, stopped by our department floor. Unusual, since he typically stayed in the executive suite upstairs. The company-wide email had gone out that morning with the annual photo attached. I'd barely found myself in it, just a slice of forehead visible behind someone's shoulder. "Great team we've built," Gray said, nodding at the framed photos lining our hallway. He paused at the new addition. "Wait a minute." His finger tapped the glass. "Where's our top performer? Where's Veda, the one who created the client-matching algorithm that saved us from bankruptcy last year?" The silence crushed the air from my lungs as 37 heads swiveled toward my desk in the corner. Beth stepped forward, her smile tight. "We have so many valuable team members, it's hard to showcase everyone prominently." "But Veda's our star," Gray interrupted, frowning. "The algorithm she built is why we're all still employed. Why is she hidden in the back?" Beth's face turned the color of spoiled milk. It was just standard protocol for company photos. Junior staff. Junior? Gray's eyebrows shot up. "Veda saved this company single-handedly. Fix this. I want a new photo by the end of the week." As he walked away, Beth's eyes locked with mine, cold as winter midnight. The message was clear. This wasn't over. And she was right. It was just the beginning. I know what you're thinking. If you've ever been deliberately pushed aside while watching someone else take credit for your work, you're probably gripping your phone a little tighter right now. This isn't just my story. It might be yours too. If you've felt that burn of injustice, tap like so, I know I'm not alone. Subscribe to hear what happened next, because believe me, this situation got much worse before it got better. My name is Veda Bright, and until that photo incident, I'd believed hard work was enough. I grew up in a small town where my parents ran the local hardware store, teaching me the value of problem solving and persistence. As the only girl in my high school who took apart computers for fun, I learned early that being underestimated could be both a curse and a strange advantage. I joined Datamine Technologies right after college, a promising startup with 20 employees and innovative ideas but struggling execution. While the outgoing personalities dominated meetings, I quietly built solutions. My client matching algorithm transformed our business model, intelligently pairing our services with the companies most likely to benefit. Revenue doubled within months, Gray noticed. Remarkable work, he told me during a rare one-on-one meeting. You've got a future here. But as our company grew to over 100 employees, so did the politics. Beth Harmon arrived as our new HR manager, bringing her designer wardrobe and MBA from an elite university. She immediately established herself as the company's social director, organizing happy hours I rarely attended, and weekend retreats that exhausted rather than energized me. Our paths might never have crossed significantly if not for her son's college project. Veda, she said, appearing at my desk one afternoon, I hear you're the genius around here. I looked up from debugging a particularly troublesome section of code, just doing my job. My son has this machine learning project for his college application. Nothing major, just needs some expert guidance. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Everyone says you're the one to ask. The deadline for our new product version was 3 days away. I'd been sleeping under my desk more often than in my bed. I'm sorry, Beth. Any other time I'd be happy to help, but with the launch deadline, it would only take an hour or two, she pressed. Helping develop young talent is part of our company values, isn't it? After the launch, I promised. I'd be glad to then. She stared at me for a long moment. I see. Well, I wouldn't want to distract from your coding. The way she said it made programming sound like a childish hobby. From that day, everything changed. My name disappeared from meeting invites. Oversight, Beth claimed when I asked. The temperature in our open office meant nothing to most people who sat in the central area, but my corner desk caught a constant draft from a faulty vent. When I requested maintenance, Beth explained budget constraints meant prioritizing shared spaces. My weekly one-on-ones with my manager, Jack, became bi-weekly, then monthly, then as needed. The isolation was subtle but effective. Then came the resources. New hires received updated equipment while my requests for additional memory lingered in processing. Access to the development server was suddenly restricted due to security protocols, requiring approvals that took days rather than minutes. Just how things work as companies grow. Jack shrugged when I raised concerns. More structure, more process. I adapted. I worked harder. I documented everything. The photo incident merely made visible what had been happening for months. But Gray's intervention threatened whatever game Beth was playing, and she escalated accordingly. The following Monday, Beth announced a departmental reorganization to better align with strategic objectives. She explained during an all-hands meeting. My stomach dropped when the new org chart appeared on screen. My position had been moved under Dave, effectively demoting me without changing my title. Questions? Beth asked, scanning the room but avoiding my eyes. I raised my hand. What metrics were used to determine the new structure? Multiple factors, she answered vaguely. Leadership qualities, communication skills, team dynamics, not technical expertise or actual results? I pressed. The room went quiet. Beth's smile tightened. We value many attributes beyond just technical output, Veda. Perhaps that's something to reflect on. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen, a resignation letter half written. The sensible move would be to leave, take my skills elsewhere. But something burned inside me, a determination that whispered, why should I be the one to go? My phone pinged with a company-wide email. Subject line, Innovation Hackathon Announcement. The annual event where teams competed to solve business challenges, with the winning solution implemented company-wide. Participation was voluntary but strongly encouraged. Another ping. A direct message from Beth. Hope you'll participate this year, Veda. though these events typically reward team players rather than solo performers. I read between the lines. She expected me to either decline, confirming I wasn't a team player, or join a team where my contributions could be diluted and attributed to others. That's when the idea began to form, not just to defend my position, but to expose the systematic way Beth and others like her operated. The pattern wasn't random, it was calculated. And if I could prove it, I registered for the hackathon as a solo participant. When the challenge was announced that Friday evening, a chill ran down my spine. Develop a solution for equitable recognition of employee contributions across the organization. Beth stood at the front, announcing the judging criteria. When she spotted me sitting alone, a small smile played at her lips. She thought she'd already won. She had no idea what was coming. The hackathon began at 6 p.m. Friday and would run until Sunday afternoon presentations. Most participants gathered in preformed teams, setting up their workspaces with snacks, energy drinks, and matching t-shirts. I claimed a small table in the corner, away from the bustling groups. Beth wandered through the open workspace, stopping to chat with various teams. Remember, we're looking for innovative but practical solutions, she reminded everyone. When she reached my lonely station, she paused. Working alone, Veda? Bold choice. I work best this way sometimes, I replied, not looking up from my screen. Her perfectly manicured finger tapped my table. The challenge is about recognizing contributions across an organization. Ironic you'd tackle that individually. After she walked away, I opened my notebook where I'd been sketching ideas since the challenge announcement. While others would likely create subjective rating systems or peer feedback tools, I had something different in mind, something that would use pure data to tell the truth. I worked through the night, fueled by determination and strong coffee. By Saturday morning, when others were bleary-eyed or napping under tables, I had the basic architecture designed. My solution would analyze multiple data sources, project management software, email communications, code repositories, meeting transcripts, to create what I called contribution networks. These weren't simple org charts or performance metrics. They were visual webs showing how ideas actually flowed through the company, who sparked innovations, who developed them, and who was instrumental in their execution. Most importantly, the system could detect patterns of recognition, who received credit versus who did the work. Around noon, Beth made another round. "How's everyone doing?" she called cheerfully. When she stopped by my table, her eyes narrowed at my progress. "What exactly are you building?" "A visualization tool," I answered vaguely. "It maps contributions using existing company data." "Interesting," she lingered, trying to make sense of my screen. "You know what the judges are looking for, right? Practicality, team collaboration, not just technical wizardry." "I understand the criteria," I replied, turning back to my work. As the hours passed, I added more sophistication. The system could identify cases where someone consistently received recognition for work primarily done by others. It could highlight employees whose critical contributions went systematically unacknowledged, all based on objective data, not opinions or popularity. By Sunday morning, with presentations looming, I hadn't slept in over 30 hours. My eyes burned, and my hands trembled slightly as I prepared my demonstration. I'd used anonymized company data from the past 6 months that developers were authorized to access for testing purposes. What it revealed made my heart race. The patterns were clearer than even I had expected. Certain people, including Dave and 3 others who were frequently in Beth's office, consistently received credit disproportionate to their actual input. Meanwhile, several employees, myself included, generated significant value that was routinely attributed to others. At 2 p.m., presentations began. Teams displayed elaborate point systems, peer recognition platforms, and award structures. The judges, Beth, Gray, and 2 department heads, nodded and took notes. Each solution addressed the challenge, but relied heavily on subjective human input. When my turn came, I connected my laptop to the projector with shaking hands. "My approach is different," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Instead of creating another system where bias can enter through subjective ratings, I've developed a tool that reveals what's already happening." I launched the visualization. Colorful nodes representing employees appeared, connected by lines of varying thickness based on their collaborations. This shows how work actually flows through our organization based on objective data. who initiates projects, who contributes code or content, who communicates crucial information. Beth shifted in her seat. And how exactly does this solve the challenge? That's for Stackety. Because it reveals invisible work patterns, I explained, clicking to the next view. It shows whose ideas drive results, regardless of their position or visibility. I loaded the 6 months of company data. Contribution networks blossomed across the screen, with certain hubs glowing brighter than others based on their impact. My own node burned bright, connected to virtually every successful initiative of the past half year. This is just one view, I continued, navigating through the interface. We can examine specific projects. This seems highly subjective, Beth interrupted. How can an algorithm possibly measure real contribution without human judgment? It doesn't measure opinions, I replied calmly. Only documented actions and outcomes. The system is completely objective. Gray leaned forward, suddenly interested. Can you show us a specific project? The client portal redesign, perhaps? I pulled up the data. The visualization clearly showed my contributions forming the backbone of the project, while the official recognition had flowed elsewhere. It also revealed something unexpected, a systematic pattern of certain employees being highlighted regardless of input, while others were consistently obscured despite critical contributions. This isn't just about me, I added quietly. It's happening to multiple people. The room fell silent. Beth's face had lost all color. How accurate is this data? Asked Mira, our technical director and one of the judges. Everything is sourced directly from our systems. Code commits, project management tools, internal communications. The algorithm simply connects and visualizes it. Gray studied the screen, then turned to Beth. This is illuminating. What do you think? Beth's laugh sounded brittle. It's certainly creative, but hardly practical. How would implementing this improve anything? It would create division, resentment. Besides, there are privacy concerns. Actually, I interrupted, the final version would anonymize individual data while still showing patterns. The goal isn't to shame individuals, but to make invisible work visible. Gray nodded slowly, and to ensure recognition goes where it's earned. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. Some team members looked uncomfortable, others intrigued. Dave stared at the floor. After all presentations concluded, the judges retreated to deliberate. I sat alone, my heart pounding. Had I gone too far? Would this backfire completely? 20 minutes later, they returned. After careful consideration, Gray announced, we've selected our winner. He paused, scanning the room. Veda's contribution network system shows remarkable insight into our challenge. It's innovative, data-driven, and addresses the root issue, recognizing true contribution rather than merely creating another layer of subjective evaluation. The applause was scattered, uncertain. Beth's face remained frozen in a tight smile. With some modifications to protect privacy while ensuring visibility, Gray continued, we'll begin implementing this system company-wide next quarter. Quote, as people gathered their things, Gray approached my table. Impressive work, Veda. I'd like you to lead the implementation team. Of course, I replied, relief washing over me. Beth materialized beside us. Gray, we should discuss the practical implications before making commitments. There are serious considerations about how this might affect team dynamics. I think that's precisely the point, isn't it? Gray replied. To affect current dynamics. He turned to me. See you tomorrow, Veda. My office, 9 a.m. As he walked away, Beth's eyes met mine. The hatred there was raw, unfiltered. Congratulations, she said, each syllable like ice. You've certainly made your point. This isn't personal, I replied quietly. It's about fairness. Her laugh was soft and dangerous. We both know that's not true. She leaned closer. You've made a mistake, Veda. I'm still head of HR. I still determine promotions, team assignments, performance reviews. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I have a long memory. She walked away, leaving me with a hollow victory, and the knowledge that I'd just made a powerful enemy even more determined to destroy me. The next morning, I arrived early for my meeting with Gray. The office was quiet, most employees not yet at their desks. I took the elevator to the executive floor, a space I'd rarely visited. Gray's assistant wasn't at her desk, so I waited in the hallway, reviewing my notes on implementation plans. The elevator dinged, and Beth stepped out, stopping short when she saw me. Veda. Early bird as usual. Good morning, Beth. She adjusted her blazer. I'm also meeting with Gray this morning about your project. My stomach tightened. Of course, she'd try to undermine this before it began. I've been thinking, she continued, her voice honey-sweet. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. You're clearly talented, and I'd hate for misunderstandings to affect your career. Misunderstandings? Your perception that I've treated you unfairly. It's simply not true. She sighed dramatically. Leadership requires difficult decisions. Not everyone understands that. The elevator opened again, and Gray emerged, surprised to find us both waiting. Good, you're both here, he said. Let's talk in my office. As we followed him, Beth flashed me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I realized with crystal clarity that this wasn't just workplace politics anymore. This was war. Gray's office overlooked the city, morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. He gestured for us to sit. I've been thinking about your hackathon solution, Veda, he began. It revealed something troubling about our organization. Beth leaned forward. If I may, Gray, while innovative, implementing such a system raises serious concerns about morale and Beth, Gray interrupted gently. I've reviewed the data myself. The patterns are undeniable. She blinked. What do you mean? I asked it to pull additional data last night. 3 years of records. He turned his monitor so we could both see. The algorithm shows systematic patterns in how recognition and opportunity have been distributed. Patterns that don't align with actual contribution. My breath caught. I hadn't gone that far back in my analysis. With all due respect, Beth said, her voice tight, algorithms can be flawed. They lack human nuance. Which is precisely their value here, Gray replied. No bias, just data. He looked directly at her. Data showing that since your arrival, certain employees have been systematically sidelined despite their performance. The silence stretched between them. I felt like I was watching a chess match, where the queen was suddenly in check. I'm implementing Veda's system, Gray continued, and I'm creating a new position to oversee it, Director of Talent Recognition, reporting directly to me. He turned to me. I'd like you to take this role, Veda. The world seemed to stop. Beth's face drained of color. That's... she began. Not up for discussion, Gray finished firmly. Also, Beth, I'd like you to transition to our Cleveland office. They need experienced HR leadership as they expand. Cleveland, our smallest satellite office, over 500 miles away. Beth's composure cracked, just for a moment. You can't be serious. I've built relationships here. I've shaped this culture. Yes, Gray said quietly. That's become quite clear. When the meeting ended, Beth left without looking at me. I remained seated, stunned by the sudden shift in power. Thank you for your courage, Gray said once we were alone. It's not easy to challenge an established system, especially when you're the one being hurt by it. I just wanted fairness, I replied. And now you'll help ensure others get it too. He smiled. The announcement goes out this afternoon. Beth transfers next week. As I walked back to my desk, the magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. I'd exposed the truth, yes, but I hadn't expected such immediate consequences. Part of me felt vindicated, another part uneasy. Beth's parting look promised this wasn't over. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine. Beth had lost this battle, but something told me she wasn't done fighting the war, and her next move would be far more dangerous. The anonymous text message was just the beginning. Over the next week, as news of my promotion and Beth's transfer spread through the company, I received 3 more messages from different unknown numbers, each more disturbing than the last. Some victories are short-lived. Smart people know when to quit. Data can be manipulated. So can people. I changed my phone number and threw myself into my new role. Gray gave me a small team and resources to implement the contribution network system, company-wide. For the first time in years, I felt valued, my work recognized. Beth cleaned out her office on Friday. I deliberately stayed late coding to avoid any confrontation. When I finally emerged around 9 that evening, the office was empty except for the cleaning staff. Beth's office door stood open, the room stripped bare except for standard furniture. As I passed, something made me pause. A small white envelope lay on the desk, my name handwritten on the front. Against my better judgment, I entered and picked it up. Inside was a simple note card with 5 words. This isn't the final chapter. I crumpled it in my fist, fighting the urge to look over my shoulder. 3 days later, the Cleveland office confirmed Beth had never arrived for her first day. Her apartment had been emptied over the weekend. She'd simply vanished. Probably found another position, Gray suggested when I mentioned it. Given the circumstances of her transfer, I'm not surprised she chose to resign. But something felt wrong. The Beth I knew wouldn't simply disappear. She'd want the last word. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The contribution network system launched in beta, with volunteers from each department testing it. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Finally, a way to ensure work was properly attributed and recognized. Then the whispers started. First, it was just Madison from accounting stopping me in the break room. "Hey, Veda, is it true you dated Gray before joining the company?" "What? No, I've never—" "Sorry," she said quickly. "Just something I heard." The next day, 2 developers were discussing project timelines when I approached. They fell silent, exchanging glances before changing the subject entirely. By week's end, I noticed people avoiding eye contact in the hallways. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Even my new team seemed uncomfortable in our meetings. Jack, my former manager, finally pulled me aside after a particularly awkward project review. "Look, Veda, as your friend, you should know what's being said." My stomach clenched. "What exactly is being said?" He lowered his voice. "That you and Gray had a relationship. That your promotion wasn't about your talent, but about personal connection. That the whole hackathon thing was orchestrated to push Beth out because she knew about it." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "That's completely false." "I know that," Jack said quickly. "But these rumors are everywhere. Even clients are asking questions." "Where did this start?" Jack shrugged. "No one knows exactly. Anonymous comments in the company suggestion box. Then emails from unknown accounts to department heads with evidence. Old photos of you and Gray supposedly at the same restaurants before you were hired. Text message screenshots. All fabricated," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I never even met Gray before my interview." "I believe you, but damage control might be necessary." The next morning, I went straight to Gray's office. His assistant gave me a strange look as I entered. "We have a problem," I began, closing the door behind me. Gray's expression was grim. "I was about to call you. You've heard the rumors?" "Yes, they're completely false." "Of course they are," he sighed heavily. "But they're spreading. The board called an emergency meeting this morning." My heart sank. The board? This is absurd. Absurd. It gets worse. Someone sent every board member a dossier alleging the contribution network system was designed to track employees in unethical ways, that it violates privacy laws. That's not true. The system explicitly anonymizes individual data when showing patterns. I know, Veda, but the damage is done. They're reviewing the entire project. And, he hesitated. And what? And they've asked that you step back from leadership until the review is complete. The injustice of it stole my breath. This is Beth. It has to be. We have no proof of that. She's gone. Not gone, I corrected. Just invisible, like I was. That afternoon, I was moved back to my old desk, stripped of my director title temporarily. The contribution network project was paused indefinitely. In the cafeteria, people sat at other tables, leaving me isolated. I'd gone from vindication to humiliation in less than a month. Beth had orchestrated my downfall without even being present. That night, alone in my apartment, I paced from room to room, anger and frustration building like steam in a pressure cooker. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about my reputation, my integrity. My laptop pinged with an email notification. Unknown sender. Subject line. Enjoying the spotlight? The body contained only an image. The company photo where I'd been hidden in the back row, but it had been digitally altered, with my face now front and center, crudely pasted over Gray's body, my arm around his shoulder. The message was clear. You wanted visibility? Now you have it. I slammed my laptop closed, hands trembling. Beth was systematically destroying everything I'd built, and she was just getting started. The next morning, I called in sick. I needed space to think, to plan. If Beth could operate from the shadows, so could I. I opened a new document and began mapping connections. Who had access to company photos? Who could fabricate text messages? Who knew enough about both of us to create convincing lies? The answer came in a flash of insight. Not who, what. The company database itself. Beth had been HR manager with access to personnel files, email archives, security badge data tracking when people entered and left the building. With that information, she could construct a false narrative placing Gray and me at the same locations, manipulate timestamps, Create a history that never existed. My phone rang Mira, the technical director who'd been one of the hackathon judges. Veda, are you okay? You're never sick. I'm fine. Just needed a day. Listen, she said, her voice low. Something strange is happening. IT reported unusual access patterns in our personnel database last month. Someone downloaded massive amounts of data using Beth's credentials, but the timing doesn't make sense. In meetings when the access occurred, my pulse quickened. Her account was compromised? Or she gave someone else access? Either way, the board is asking questions about data security now, on top of everything else. I sat up straighter. That's it. That's how she's doing this. She's using company data to construct these false narratives. Maybe. But without proof, it's just another theory. Proof. I needed proof. Mira, does the system log external IP addresses when someone accesses the database remotely? Of course. Standard security protocol. Could you send me those logs? Just for the unusual access patterns you mentioned? She hesitated. That's not exactly authorized, especially with you temporarily removed from leadership. I know, but if I'm right, Beth is systematically manipulating information to discredit both me and the contribution network system. The system that would have exposed exactly this kind of behavior. Silence stretched between us. I'll see what I can do, she finally said. But Veda, be careful. Whoever's doing this is dangerous. By that evening, Mira had sent me the logs. The unauthorized access came from an IP address in a small town 30 miles away, far enough from the city to be inconspicuous, close enough to stay connected to company gossip. I searched property records for the area, no Beth Harmon listed, but there was a rental agreement for a small lakeside cabin, signed by Robert Harmon, her brother. The pieces clicked into place. I drove out the next morning, telling myself I was just gathering information. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, partially hidden by pine trees. A silver sedan was parked outside, not Beth's usual car. From a distance, I watched through binoculars as a man, presumably Robert, left carrying grocery bags. Once he drove away, I approached the cabin cautiously. Through the window, I could see a desk set up with multiple monitors, and there, moving between them, was Beth. She looked different, hair cut short, dyed dark, but it was unmistakably her, typing furiously at a computer where the screen displayed what looked like our company intranet. I snapped photos with my phone, heart pounding. Then I retreated to my car and called Mira. I found her. She's living under the radar, still accessing our system somehow. That's disturbing. What are you going to do? A plan was forming in my mind, not just to clear my name, but to ensure Beth could never do this to anyone again. First, I need to understand exactly how she's manipulating the data. Can you check if there's unusual activity in the network traffic analysis logs? I'll check. But Veda, you should tell Gray about this. Not yet. Beth has been careful to stay one step ahead. If we move too soon, she'll disappear again and continue the damage from somewhere else. Over the next week, working remotely, I built a parallel version of the contribution network system, one designed to track not just work contributions, but data manipulation. Who accessed what information, when, and what changes were made. Mira provided me with network logs showing Beth was using her brother's credentials. NSU, he worked in facilities management with limited system access, combined with backdoor access points she'd created before. Leaving. My trap was simple but effective. I created a shadow dataset, a fake treasure trove of manipulatable information about me, Gray, and several board members. Information that would be irresistible to someone looking to create more damaging rumors. Then I worked with Mira to place it in a seemingly secure but actually monitored section of the database. Anyone accessing it would trigger an invisible trace, marking every piece of data they touched with an undetectable watermark. The honeypot is set, Mira confirmed 3 days later. Now, we wait. We didn't wait long. That weekend, the trap was triggered. Someone had accessed the shadow dataset using Robert's credentials, downloading personnel files, email archives, and calendar data. Got her, I whispered, watching the trace activate. Monday morning, I returned to the office, head held high despite the whispers and stares. In the afternoon, new rumors began circulating, this time about Gray having hidden financial connections to board members, explaining why they'd supported his inappropriate relationship with me. I smiled grimly. Beth had taken the bait. using the watermark data to construct her newest attack. I messaged Mira, "It's time." The emergency board meeting was called for Wednesday morning. I wasn't invited, but Gray insisted I attend. When I walked into the boardroom, 8 pairs of eyes turned to me, with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. "Miss Bright," the board chair began, "given the circumstances, your presence here is unusual." "I understand," I replied calmly, "but what I'm about to show you affects everyone in this room." Gray nodded for me to continue. I connected my laptop to the display system. For the past month, this company has been under attack from within. Not a technical attack, but an informational one. I pulled up the network access logs. These show unauthorized access to our personnel database from an external location, using credentials belonging to Robert Harmon, brother of former HR manager Beth Harmon. Murmurs filled the room. The board chair leaned forward. "And you know this how?" "Because I found her." I displayed the photos I'd taken of Beth at the cabin. "She's been systematically creating false narratives using manipulated company data." "That's a serious accusation," one board member said. "What proof do you have that the information about you and Gray is false?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for, because I set a trap, and she walked right into it. I launched the special version of the contribution network system. On screen, a web of connections appeared, but instead of showing work contributions, it displayed data manipulation. Every file Beth had accessed, every alteration made, every piece of information extracted and repurposed was highlighted in red. The rumors about financial connections between Gray and board members, completely fabricated using data from my shadow dataset, data that was invisibly watermarked. I zoomed in on specific documents. Here's the original data. And here's how it was altered to create the appearance of impropriety. I clicked through example after example. Timestamps changed, contexts removed, innocent interactions reframed as suspicious, and the alleged relationship between Gray and me, constructed the same way. Meeting timestamps manipulated to make it appear we were in the same restaurants before I was hired. Security badge data altered to suggest patterns that never existed. The boardroom had gone completely silent. Beth Harmon created an elaborate web of lies because I exposed how she'd been unfairly undermining people who threatened her control. When Gray supported my contribution network system, she targeted both of us. The board chair cleared his throat. "If what you're showing us is accurate," "What it is," Gray interrupted. "It has verified the unauthorized access and the data manipulation. Then we have a serious security breach on our hands," the chair concluded, "and potentially criminal activity." "There's more," I said quietly. "The watermark data Beth accessed contains hidden code. Every time she opens those files, her location is pinged back to our servers." I pulled up a map with a blinking red dot. "That's where she is right now, still actively working to undermine this company and everyone in it." The board chair reached for the phone. "I'm calling our legal team and the authorities." As the meeting concluded, board members approached to apologize for doubting me. The contribution network project was immediately reinstated, with increased funding and my directorship restored. But as everyone filed out, I remained seated, staring at the blinking dot on the map, Beth's current location. Gray touched my shoulder. "It's over, Veda. You won." I smiled but said nothing, because he was wrong. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. That night, I drove back to the cabin. Police would be coming tomorrow with warrants, but there was something I needed to do first, something just between Beth and me. As I approached through the trees, I saw lights on inside. Beth was still there, unaware that her carefully constructed revenge plan was collapsing around her. I walked to the front door and knocked firmly. The peephole darkened. Then, silence. I knocked again. "Beth, I know you're in there. It's just me, alone." The door opened a crack, chain still in place. Beth's face appeared, her expression a mixture of shock and rage. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I think we should talk," I said calmly. Woman to woman, Beth's eyes narrowed to slits. "You've got some nerve showing up here. May I come in? What I have to say won't take long." She hesitated, then unlatched the chain. 5 minutes, then you leave." The cabin's interior was meticulously organized, multiple screens displaying various data feeds, printouts organized in color-coded folders, a detailed timeline pinned to one wall with my name at the center, connected to Gray and other company executives with red string. "Quite the operation," I observed. Beth crossed her arms. If you came to gloat, save it. Actually, I came to understand. I gestured to the elaborate web she'd created. All this effort, all this planning. Why? Why? She laughed, a harsh sound lacking any humor. You really don't get it, do you? You think this is about some petty workplace drama? About my son's college project? Then what is it about? Beth paced to the window, checking outside before turning back to me. Control, power, the natural order of things. Her voice had taken on an evangelical quality. People like you think merit should determine success, that the quiet, technical person who never looks up from their screen deserves recognition. Don't they? The world doesn't work that way. Never has. Social capital, who you know, how you make people feel, the alliances you build, that's what drives success. I was maintaining balance. By deliberately hiding others' contributions. By pushing people into corners. By ensuring those who understand how to play the game were rewarded. She gestured dismissively. Your algorithm may have doubled revenue, but who built the client relationships that implemented it? Who smoothed ruffled feathers when deadlines slipped? Who created the culture that attracted talent? You, I acknowledged, but that doesn't justify erasing others. Beth's smile was cold. Your so-called contribution network threatened everything. Suddenly, decisions would be made based on data instead of human judgment. People like me would become unnecessary. The realization hit me. You weren't targeting me specifically. You were fighting for survival. Finally, she gets it. Beth sank into her desk chair. When Gray chose your system over my expertise, he declared war on the entire social structure I'd built. And your response was to fabricate rumors, manipulate data, and try to destroy both our reputations? I did what was necessary. I nodded slowly, taking in the room again, the evidence of her obsession, the lengths she'd gone to maintain her version of control. I have something to show you, I said, pulling out my phone. I opened an app and turned the screen toward her. Beth squinted. What am I looking at? A live feed of the contribution network. The board reinstated it this morning. Full implementation across all departments. Her face drained of color. They did. Your attacks backfired, Beth. Every rumor you spread, every piece of data you manipulated, strengthened their conviction that we needed a more objective system. I swiped to another screen. And this? This is the special version I built to track data manipulation. The one that watermarked the files you accessed and pinged your location back to our servers. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. You're bluffing. The board has seen everything. So has legal. And the authorities. I checked my watch. Who should be arriving in about 10 minutes? Beth lunged for her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I'll delete everything. There won't be any proof. I'm getting by the common. Too late. Every action you've taken has been logged and preserved on our secure servers. The invisible code in those files you downloaded, it's been documenting everything. She froze, then slowly raised her eyes to mine. What do you want? Money? For me to disappear permanently? I want you to understand something. I moved closer, my voice steady and clear. This isn't about you versus me. It never was. It's about fairness, transparency, making sure people's work is recognized, regardless of who they are or how they play office politics. Noble sentiments, she sneered. So why come here alone? Why not wait for the police? I smiled. Because I wanted you to hear this from me directly. I leaned in closer. You were right about one thing. Visibility matters. But you used yours to hide others. I'm using mine to make sure no one can hide again. Outside, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. Car doors slammed. That would be the authorities, I said calmly. Beth's composure cracked completely. You little. Before they come in, I have one question. All those times you pushed me into the corner, hid my contributions, isolated me from the team. Did you ever consider I might be learning, watching, that everything you did to diminish me was actually preparing me for this moment? A knock at the door interrupted her response. This isn't over, Beth hissed. Actually, it is. I walked to the door and opened it, revealing 2 police officers and Gray. Beth Harmon? One officer asked. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of computer fraud, identity theft, and corporate espionage. As they led her out, Beth locked eyes with me one final time. No words were necessary. Her glare said everything. Gray stepped inside, surveying the elaborate setup. My God, She was more obsessed than we realized. It was never personal for me, I said quietly, but it was entirely personal for her. 3 months later, Beth pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. The story made headlines in tech industry publications. HR manager's revenge plot exposes workplace recognition flaws. HR manager's revenge plot. Our contribution network system became the company's most valuable asset, not just for internal use, but as a product we now license to other organizations. Gray promoted me to Chief Innovation Officer, with a team of 20 reporting directly to me. On the anniversary of the company photo incident, we gathered for a new picture. This time, everyone stood mixed together. No front row for executives, no back row for junior staff. As the photographer prepared to shoot, Gray called out, "Wait, where's our CIO?" I stepped forward from where I'd been helping arrange people, and a space opened in the center of the group. "Right where she belongs," someone called out, and laughter rippled through the crowd. As the flash went off, I wasn't thinking about Beth, or vindication, or even justice. I was thinking about all the quiet contributors and companies everywhere who might finally become visible because of what we'd built. Later that day, I passed the wall where our company milestones were displayed. The newest addition was a framed article about our contribution network system being adopted by major tech firms worldwide. Beneath it hung our new company photo, everyone visible, everyone valued. My phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. For a second, my heart raced, old fears resurfacing. But when I opened it, I found only a single line. "Your story gave me courage to speak up at my company. Thank you." I smiled, took a screenshot, and pinned it to the top of my personal board. Because in the end, true revenge wasn't about destroying Beth. It was about building something she could never tear down. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or had your contributions overlooked, I hope it gives you courage. Sometimes the person pushed to the back row is exactly the one who should be leading. Tap like if you've ever been underestimated. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, and comment about a time when you stood up for yourself. Remember, the most powerful response to being made invisible isn't revenge. It's becoming impossible to ignore. "My house is worth more than your lifetime salary," Dex announced, swirling expensive champagne in his crystal flute. His voice carried across the company's anniversary celebration, intentionally loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. 2 acres overlooking the bay, just closed last week. He wasn't speaking to me specifically, not yet. He was performing for the small gathering of employees who had congregated near the open bar, people too junior to escape but too ambitious to walk away from the CEO's only son. I watched from several feet away, nursing a sparkling water while pretending to examine the art on the wall. 8 bedrooms, he continued, gesturing expansively. Though, honestly, who needs that many? But the wine cellar. He kissed his fingertips dramatically. That's where the real money went. Someone asked a timid question about the price, which was exactly what Dex wanted. "Let's just say it has more zeros than most people here will see in their lifetime." His eyes swept the group before landing directly on me. "Hey, Penny, come join us. We're talking about real estate." The room seemed to shrink as heads turned my way. 3 years at this investment firm had taught me that Dex only called attention to me when he planned to use me as a prop in his performance of superiority. "I was just telling everyone about my new place," he said as I reluctantly approached. "What are you paying for that apartment on the east side? Something like $2,000 a month?" He knew exactly what neighborhood I lived in because he'd made it his business to know, and to mention it whenever possible. "Something like that," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "That's what, about $24,000 a year?" He pretended to calculate in his head. "So, you'd need to work. Let's see, roughly 200 years to afford my house." He laughed, a sound like expensive silverware clattering down marble stairs. The circle of colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Some found sudden interest in their shoes. Others manufactured polite smiles. "Assuming you got yearly raises, maybe only 150 years, he added, eyes gleaming. "But hey, that's why some people make the big decisions while others just analyze them." The reference to my recently sidelined promotion stung exactly as he'd intended. 2 weeks ago, I'd been passed over for head analyst in favor of Dex's fraternity brother who'd been with the company all of 3 months. "Actually," I said, surprising myself by speaking, "I'm quite happy with my financial situation." Dex's perfect eyebrows arched. "Are you? Driving that 10-year-old sedan, bringing lunch in paper bags, living in that neighborhood?" He emphasized the last word as if describing something stuck to his shoe. I make choices that work for me. Choices? He snorted. Let's be honest. You make the choices available to people who will always work for people like me and my father. That's when something inside me, something that had been bending for 3 long years, finally snapped. Interesting perspective, I said, reaching into my purse. I extracted a single folded document, my latest investment portfolio statement, and placed it on the high top table between us. Perhaps you should check your math. Dex glanced down dismissively, then did a double take. His eyes widened as he scanned the figures. The color drained from his face so quickly, I worried he might faint onto the imported marble floor. This can't be, he stammered, picking up the paper with suddenly unsteady hands. But it is, I said softly. 27% ownership stake in the parent company, compared to your family's 22. I've been buying while you've been spending. The champagne flute trembled in his grip. A droplet spilled over the edge, landing on his custom-tailored sleeve. That's not possible, he whispered, but the panic in his eyes told me he already knew it was true. I leaned closer, speaking just loudly enough for our immediate circle to hear. The shareholders' meeting is next week. I've already spoken with several major investors about restructuring leadership based on actual ability rather than last names. His face contorted with a mixture of shock, rage, and most satisfyingly, fear. You might want to reconsider that yacht you've been talking about, I added. Property taxes on mansions can be brutal on unemployment. I won't lie, if you've been enjoying this intense office showdown so far, you might want to hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this revenge story unfolds. Because trust me, this confrontation is just the beginning of how I systematically dismantled the man who spent years trying to erase me. My name is Penny Wade, and until that moment at the company party, most people underestimated me. That was partially by design. I'm 5'4" with naturally curly hair that refuses to be tamed and a face that looks younger than my 32 years. I don't command attention when I enter rooms. I don't interrupt conversations. I observe, calculate, and wait. I moved to the city 8 years ago with a finance degree and a plan. While classmates chased prestigious addresses and luxury lifestyles, I lived with 3 roommates and worked 60-hour weeks. I clipped coupons while building investment models after midnight. When I finally landed the job at Emerald Investments, I continued living well below my means, not out of necessity, but strategy. What no one at the firm realized was that I'd been systematically investing nearly 70% of my income while learning the market's patterns. I didn't buy designer clothes or weekend getaways. I bought carefully researched stocks, bonds, and real estate investment trusts. While Dex spent $300,000 on a car, I acquired shares that would eventually be worth millions. My first encounter with Dex happened during my initial week. He strolled past my desk, stopped, looked at my computer screen showing complex market analyses, and said, "Cute that you're trying. But instinct for this business is something you're born with, not something you learn." Then he walked away, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and unearned confidence. I might have dismissed him as just another entitled executive's son if not for what happened during my 3rd month. I'd developed an analysis of an emerging market sector that identified 3 undervalued companies poised for explosive growth. After presenting it to my direct supervisor, the report mysteriously disappeared. 2 weeks later, Dex presented the exact same findings to the board, using my charts, my data, but with his name on the cover. Brilliant insight, the CEO had proclaimed, beaming at his son. This is why you're on the leadership track. When I tried to speak up, my supervisor pulled me aside. Let it go, he warned. His father signs all our paychecks. That became the pattern. My work would vanish, only to reappear under Dex's name. My meeting invitations would be accidentally deleted. My access to key data would be restricted right before important analyses were due. Each time I began gaining recognition, Dex would find a way to step on my professional neck. The worst came when my risk assessment model saved the company from a potentially catastrophic investment. I'd spotted warning signs everyone else missed about a supposedly can't-miss opportunity. My analysis prevented a $50 million loss. The day after implementation, Dex received a public commendation and bonus for his exceptional risk mitigation strategy. That evening, I updated my resume and began networking with former colleagues. But as I contemplated leaving, I noticed something fascinating in the company's financial reports. The parent corporation's stock was significantly undervalued. and the family's ownership percentage had been gradually decreasing as they sold shares to fund expansions. An idea took root. Instead of running, what if I played a longer game? I began systematically acquiring shares through careful planning. Each time Dex arrived in a new sports car or bragged about another luxury purchase, I bought more stock. When he mentioned putting a down payment on his waterfront mansion, I liquidated my other investments and acquired a substantial block of shares that pushed my ownership past the 20% threshold. All while driving my reliable old car, bringing homemade lunches, and living in my modest apartment on the east side. The company never noticed because I purchased through various investment vehicles, all perfectly legal, just strategically complex. While Dex focused on displaying wealth, I focused on acquiring actual control. "You've been awfully quiet lately," Dex remarked about 2 months before the confrontation. "Finally accepting your place in the pecking order?" "Just focused on my work," I'd replied, mentally calculating how many shares I'd purchased that morning. "Smart," he said, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "Know your limitations." I'd smiled politely while thinking about the board meeting I'd soon be leading, the one where his limitations would become painfully apparent to everyone. Standing in the suddenly silent circle of colleagues at the anniversary party, I watched the realization wash over Dex's face. For 3 years, he'd seen me as furniture, a background character in his story of inherited success. Now he was finally seeing me as I truly was, the architect of his downfall. "You can't do this," he hissed, gripping my document so tightly it crumpled. "My father will receive my full restructuring proposal tomorrow morning," I interrupted calmly, "including detailed documentation of how company performance has suffered under nepotistic leadership policies. The board answers to shareholders," I said. And as of last week, I became the largest individual shareholder. I've already spoken with 3 institutional investors who control another 30% combined. They're quite interested in my ideas for increasing profitability through merit-based executive selection. Dex lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You sneaky little—" "I wouldn't finish that sentence," I said quietly, looking pointedly at his hand. "Not with so many witnesses." He released me as if burned, suddenly aware of the circle of wide-eyed colleagues watching this exchange. Behind them, I noticed the CEO entering the room, scanning the crowd for his son. "Your father's here," I said. "Should we share the news with him now, or would you prefer to handle that conversation privately?" Dex's eyes darted toward the entrance, then back to me. In that moment, I saw genuine fear, perhaps for the first time in his privileged life. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Actually," I replied, reclaiming my portfolio statement and returning it to my purse. "It is. But you're right about one thing." I gestured toward the beautiful view of the city skyline visible through the venue's windows. "That house of yours truly is spectacular. I might even make you an offer on it once the price drops. I hear distressed properties can be quite affordable." As I turned to walk away, leaving him standing there with his perfect world crumbling around him, Dex grabbed my shoulder and spun me around, his face contorted with rage. "You will regret this," he growled, loud enough for nearby conversations to halt. "Nobody knows what you're really capable of, but I do." His words sent an unexpected chill through me. What did he mean? What did he know? Before I could respond, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Check your investment accounts again, Penny. I think you'll find some irregularities." A cold wave of uncertainty washed over me. Irregularities? What was he talking about? Before I could demand clarification, Dex's father appeared at his side, clapping a hand on his son's shoulder. "There you are." The CEO's booming voice commanded attention as it always did. "The Phelps Group just arrived. They're eager to hear about your projections for next quarter." Dex's expression transformed instantly, the mask of charming confidence sliding back into place with practiced ease. But as he turned to follow his father, he shot me one last look, a smirk that carried a warning. I stood frozen for several seconds after they departed. My moment of triumph suddenly felt hollow, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. I slipped away from the party, found a quiet corner in the hallway, and pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I logged into my brokerage accounts. Everything appeared normal at first glance. My holdings were intact, my ownership percentage unchanged. But when I accessed the transaction history, my heart stuttered. There were anomalies, small but significant discrepancies in the timing of certain purchases, oddities in the routing of funds, peculiar patterns that wouldn't be obvious to anyone not intimately familiar with these accounts. Nothing immediately alarming, but enough to raise questions, if examined closely by financial regulators. How had he known? How had he gained access? And more importantly, what was he planning to do with this information? I leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. The champagne I hadn't even drunk seemed to swirl in my head. Penny, are you okay? I looked up to see Mira, one of the few colleagues I genuinely trusted, watching me with concern. As head of legal compliance, she had been one of the few people at the firm who had recognized my abilities from the beginning. Just needed some air, I managed, locking my phone screen. Mira studied me carefully. I saw what happened with Dex. Words already spreading about you owning more company stock than the family. That wasn't supposed to happen yet, I admitted. I was planning to wait until after the shareholders' meeting next week. Well, the cat's clawing its way out of the bag now. She glanced back toward the party. You should know that Arnold just pulled Dex and 3 board members into a side room. They looked intense. Arnold, the CEO, Dex's father, the man who had built this company through aggressive, sometimes questionable tactics. A man who had never lost a business fight in his 40-year career. I need to leave, I said suddenly, gathering my things. Penny, wait. Mira caught my arm. Whatever you're planning, be careful. The Woods family doesn't play by normal rules when they're threatened. I knew she was right. I'd witnessed their ruthlessness for 3 years, always directed at competitors, never at me, because until tonight, I'd never registered as a threat. Thanks, Mira. I'll call you tomorrow. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. By the time I reached my apartment, a plan was forming. If Dex had found ways to create irregularities in my investment history, I needed to understand exactly what he'd done and how to counter it. I spent hours combing through records, transaction histories, and account statements. The inconsistencies were subtle, timestamp anomalies on certain transactions, routing numbers that didn't quite match documentation, deposit sequences that could, if viewed through a particular lens, suggest market manipulation. None of it was actually illegal. I'd been meticulous about following regulations. But in the hands of someone motivated to find problems, these discrepancies could trigger investigations, freeze assets, and create enough chaos to derail my plans. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Smart move leaving early. Breakfast tomorrow? 7 a.m. Harbor Cafe. Come alone or don't come at all. No signature, but it could only be from one person, Dex. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the remaining hours strategizing, preparing, and fortifying myself for whatever he might have planned. By dawn, I was exhausted, but resolved. Harbor Cafe was an unassuming diner on the waterfront, the kind of place that served fishermen and dock workers, not finance executives. At 6:55 a.m., I pushed through the door, scanning the nearly empty restaurant until I spotted him in a back booth, wearing sunglasses despite the dim interior lighting. You look terrible, Dex said as I slid into the seat across from him. Rough night? What did you do to my accounts? I asked, keeping my voice low. He removed his sunglasses, revealing bloodshot eyes that matched my own. Straight to business. That's what I've always secretly admired about you, Penny. No games, except you've played nothing but games with me for 3 years. Not games, strategy. He signaled to a waitress, who promptly brought over 2 coffees. Though I admit, I underestimated you. Severely. Answer my question. He sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim. I didn't do anything to your accounts. I simply became aware of certain patterns. Patterns that could look problematic to regulators. Patterns that might raise questions about how a mid-level analyst acquired enough capital to purchase 27% of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I've broken no laws. Of course not. You're too smart for that. He leaned forward. But investigations are messy, time-consuming things. Assets get frozen. Reputations get questioned. Even when you're eventually cleared, the damage is done. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You made a bold move last night. I'm making one this morning. He slid a folder across the table. Open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a term sheet, outlining an offer to purchase my shares at 15% above market value, contingent upon my immediate resignation and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. That's more money than most people see in a lifetime, Dex said quietly. You could leave today, buy your own mansion on the water, never work another day in your life. I stared at the numbers, calculating quickly. It was an enormous sum, Life-changing money by any standard. And if I refuse? His expression hardened. Then my father makes a call to the Securities Exchange Commission this afternoon about unusual trading patterns he's noticed. He's golf partners with one of the commissioners, and while they investigate, the board will certainly need to postpone any decisions about leadership restructuring. That's illegal. It's blackmail. It's business, Dex corrected. And it's the choice in front of you. Walk away wealthy, or fight a battle that will drag on for years with no guaranteed outcome. I thought about my carefully constructed plan, now threatening to collapse, about the countless nights I'd worked while Dex partied on yachts, about watching him take credit for my ideas, my analyses, my contributions. You want my answer now? By the end of business today, the offer expires at 5 p.m. I closed the folder and stood up. I'll be in touch. Penny. He caught my wrist as I turned to leave. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've proven your point. You outsmarted me. Take the win and the money. I pulled my arm from his grasp. Unlike you, Dex, this was never about the money for me. The morning air felt crisp against my face as I left the cafe. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. 9 a.m. meeting with the head of the research department, one of several I'd scheduled for today, to begin building support for my restructuring proposal. By noon, I'd met with 3 department heads, all of whom had responded with varying degrees of surprise to my revelation about ownership stakes. None had committed to supporting my plan, but none had dismissed it outright either. Progress, but not victory. Returning to my desk, I found a small box with no card. Inside was a single chess piece, a white queen, and a note that read, "Even queens can be taken." The handwriting was unmistakably Arnold's. The intimidation tactics were escalating. First Dex with his buyout offer and thinly veiled threats. Now his father with chess metaphors. The message was clear. They were unified against me, prepared to use their considerable power to maintain control. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a curious calm settling over me. 3 years of watching, learning, and planning had prepared me for this moment. I knew the Woods family better than they realized. Their tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this exact scenario. At 2:30 p.m., I met Mira in the building's courtyard, away from prying eyes and ears. "They're scared," she said after I recounted the morning's events. "I've never seen Arnold rattled before, but he was barking at everyone in the executive meeting. Something about accelerating the Westlake acquisition." The Westlake acquisition? Of course. It was the cornerstone of the company's growth strategy for the next 5 years. A deal that would either cement Emerald Investments as an industry leader or sink it if mishandled. A deal that Dex had been showcasing as his personal triumph, though I knew he understood little about its complexities. "When's the final signing?" I asked. "Tomorrow afternoon. The Westlake team flies in at noon." 24 hours. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more dangerous. "Mira, I need copies of all the Westlake documentation. The real versions, not the sanitized summaries Dex has been circulating." She hesitated. "That's way beyond my clearance level, but not beyond Arnold's assistance level. The one you've been dating for the past 6 months. Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "I notice things others don't. It's both my gift and my curse." Mira studied me for a long moment. "What are you planning, Penny?" "Something risky. Something that could either save this company or end my career. Maybe both." "That doesn't answer my question." I smiled for the first time that day. "No, it doesn't. But the less you know right now, the better. Plausible deniability and all that." She sighed. "I'll see what I can do. But Penny, whatever you're thinking, the Woods family has destroyed people for less than what you did last night." "I'm counting on that," I replied. "Their predictability when threatened is the one advantage I have." Back at my desk, I opened a secure messaging app on my phone and sent a brief text to a contact I hadn't communicated with in months. "Ready to move on Westlake. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Bring everything we discussed." The response came almost immediately. "Confirmed, package prepared as requested." I took a deep breath and turned my attention to Dex's buyout offer. The deadline, 5 p.m., loomed just hours away. I needed to respond, but not in the way they expected. At 4:45 p.m., I walked deliberately to Dex's corner office, folder in hand. His assistant tried to stop me, but I pushed past her, entering without knocking. Dex was on the phone but ended the call abruptly when he saw me. "Cutting it close, aren't we?" I placed the folder on his desk. My response: he opened it eagerly, then frowned at the single sheet inside. This is blank. Exactly. His face darkened. Don't play games with me, Penny. The offer expires in 15 minutes. I'm not accepting or rejecting. Not yet. That's not how this works. Actually, it is. I perched on the edge of his desk, invading his space deliberately, because I have something you want, and you have something I want. And what might that be? His voice dripped with condescension. I want the Westlake deal. He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. You're delusional. That's $1 billion acquisition that I've been orchestrating for a year. 9 months, I corrected. And you've been orchestrating the public-facing aspects while others handled the substance. I want lead position on the final negotiations and integration plan. Absolutely not. My father would never. Your father will agree if you tell him to. Because the alternative is me walking into tomorrow's signing meeting with evidence that the Westlake valuation is inflated by 30% due to accounting practices that border on fraudulent. The color drained from his face. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your emails. There should be one from Westlake's CFO that arrived about. I glanced at my watch. 3 minutes ago. He turned to his computer, clicking rapidly before freezing at whatever he saw on the screen. How did you? Like I said, I noticed things others don't, including weaknesses in the Westlake financials that your team overlooked because you were too fixated on closing the deal quickly. His eyes narrowed. What's your angle here? If the deal falls apart, your shares take the same hit as everyone else's. My angle is fixing the deal before it destroys this company, but I need to be in the room to do it. And if I refuse? I stood up. Then your father makes his call to the SEC. I release my findings on Westlake to the board and the business press, and we see whose career survives the ensuing chaos. Maybe neither of ours. Maybe just mine. The silence between us stretched taut as a wire. Finally, Dex reached for his phone. Dad, we need to talk about tomorrow's Westlake meeting. There's been a development. As he outlined my proposal to his father, I watched his face cycle through anger, calculation, and finally, reluctant acceptance. When he hung up, his expression was unreadable. Congratulations, he said flatly. You'll have your seat at the table tomorrow, but this changes nothing about our larger situation. I disagree, I replied, moving toward the door. It changes everything, because what Dex didn't know, what he couldn't possibly suspect, was that tomorrow's meeting was just one piece of a much larger plan. A plan that had begun the moment I first watched him take credit for my work 3 years ago. That night brought no sleep. I spent hours reviewing the Westlake documents Mira had somehow obtained, confirming what I'd already suspected. The acquisition target had systematically inflated their value through accounting maneuvers that, while not technically illegal, skirted dangerously close to the line. If Emerald completed the purchase at the current valuation, we'd be overpaying by nearly 30%, a mistake that would drain capital reserves and potentially trigger a liquidity crisis within 18 months. More importantly, I discovered something the Woods family had missed entirely. Westlake's founder, Gilbert Hayes, didn't actually want to sell to Emerald. He'd been maneuvered into the deal by his board and had been looking for an escape hatch for months. That was the leverage I needed. Morning came with a text from Dex. Meeting moved to 10 a.m. Executive boardroom. Don't be late. They were trying to throw me off balance by changing the schedule. I'd expected as much. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without flashiness, my most comfortable heels, minimal jewelry. Today wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about focus and execution. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Colleagues stared as I walked through the main floor, whispers following in my wake. News of my confrontation with Dex had clearly spread. Mira intercepted me by the elevators. Arnold's been in the executive boardroom since 7 a.m. with the general counsel, she murmured. Whatever you're planning, they're planning something too. I'm counting on it, I replied as the elevator doors opened. The executive floor was unusually quiet when I stepped out. Arnold's assistant avoided eye contact as I approached the boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see them waiting. Arnold at the head of the table, Dex to his right, 3 board members, the general counsel, and the chief financial officer. No sign yet of the Westlake team. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Ah, Penny, Arnold said, his voice carrying the forced joviality of a predator playing with its food. Prompt as always. Please, join us. I took the only available seat, at the far end of the table, as far from the action as possible. a deliberate placement to minimize my influence. Before our guests arrive, Arnold continued, I believe we should clarify expectations. He slid a document toward me. This outlines the parameters of your participation today. I glanced at the paper without touching it. A muzzle disguised as a protocol agreement, restrictions on what questions I could ask, what topics I could raise, essentially reducing me to an observer. I won't be signing that, I said calmly. Arnold's smile tightened. Then I'm afraid you won't be participating. Actually, I will. I opened my laptop. Because in approximately 3 minutes, the Westlake team will arrive, and unless I'm in this meeting with full participation rights, they'll receive this email detailing the 30% valuation discrepancy I've identified in their financials. Dex leaned forward. You're bluffing. You wouldn't torpedo the deal. I'm not torpedoing anything. I'm saving this company from a catastrophic overpayment. I turned my laptop so they could see the drafted email, addressed to the entire Westlake executive team, with comprehensive documentation attached. The CFO reached for the laptop. Let me see that. For the next 2 minutes, he scrolled through my analysis, his expression growing increasingly grave. Finally, he looked up at Arnold. She's right. These numbers don't align with what we've been working from. Arnold's face flushed with anger. Why wasn't this caught earlier? The CFO glanced uncomfortably at Dex. The financial review team reported to me, Dex interrupted, and we thoroughly vetted everything. This is clearly a last-minute attempt to disrupt the deal. Is it? I pulled out a printed copy of my analysis. Check the metadata on the files. I identified these discrepancies 3 months ago. Before anyone could respond, the boardroom door opened, and the receptionist announced the arrival of the Westlake team. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense negotiation I'd ever experienced. The Westlake executives, LEB, led by their CEO, not the founder, presented their company as a flawless acquisition target with limitless growth potential. Dex and Arnold nodded along enthusiastically, while I waited, watching Gilbert Hayes, the founder, who sat silently at the edge of his team. When the presentation concluded, Arnold began his prepared remarks about synergies and strategic alignment. I caught Hayes' eye and gave a slight nod. He checked his watch, then whispered something to his colleague. Before we proceed, the Westlake CEO suddenly announced, Our team needs a brief recess, perhaps 30 minutes? Arnold looked annoyed at the interruption, but agreed. As everyone stood to take a break, I slipped out of the room and made my way to a small conference room down the hall where a man in his 60s waited, Gilbert Hayes himself, having quietly separated from his team. You were right, he said without preamble. They're rushing this through despite my objections. And you've confirmed the discrepancies in the valuation? He nodded grimly. Your analysis was correct. The growth projections are built on contracts that aren't yet finalized and cost reductions that aren't realistic. Then let's proceed as discussed. When the meeting reconvened, I noticed an immediate change in the room's energy. Hayes had returned to his seat, but now sat more upright, more engaged. The Westlake CEO kept glancing at him nervously. Arnold was midway through outlining the integration timeline when I finally spoke up. Before we go further, I said, my voice cutting through his presentation, I'd like to address the valuation concerns directly. Dex shot me a warning look, but I continued. My analysis shows that Westlake's current valuation is inflated by approximately 30% due to several accounting approaches that, while technically permissible, don't reflect operational reality. The room fell silent. The Westlake CEO started to object, but Hayes raised his hand, stopping him. Ms. Wade is correct, Hayes said quietly. And as the founder and still largest individual shareholder of Westlake, I cannot in good conscience allow this transaction to proceed under these terms. Chaos erupted. The Westlake CEO argued that Hayes didn't speak for the company. Arnold and Dex tried to salvage the situation, suggesting we table the valuation discussion and focus on strategic alignment. The general counsel whispered urgently to Arnold. I waited until the noise subsided before speaking again. I propose an alternative structure, I said, opening a folder I'd prepared. A revised valuation reflecting actual performance, with an earn-out provision tied to achieving the growth metrics Westlake has projected. Hayes nodded approvingly. That seems fair. If our projections are accurate, as my executive team insists, then the full value will be realized. This is highly irregular, the Westlake CEO sputtered. We had an agreement in principle. Based on incomplete information, I countered, sliding copies of my analysis to everyone at the table. If anyone disagrees with my findings, I welcome their specific objections. For the next hour, we dissected the numbers. With each question, each challenge, it became increasingly clear that my analysis was sound. The Westlake executives grew more uncomfortable, while Hayes became more engaged, eventually moving to sit directly across from me. By early afternoon, we had the framework of a revised deal, one that protected Emerald from overpayment while giving Westlake fair compensation with upside potential if their projections proved accurate. As the details were being finalized, Arnold suddenly stood. "Let's take a short break. Dex, Penny, a word in my office." Once behind closed doors, Arnold's cordial facade vanished. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Saving this company about $300 million, I replied evenly. "You're undermining months of work," Dex snapped, "making us look unprepared and divided." "No, I'm correcting a critical oversight that would have damaged this company irreparably. An oversight that occurred under your supervision, Dex." Arnold stepped between us. "Enough. The situation is what it is. We'll complete this revised deal, but make no mistake, this power play will have consequences." "It already has," I said, reaching into my bag and retrieving a sealed envelope. "This is for you." Arnold took it warily. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter from the board of directors calling for an emergency session at 4 p.m. today. At the bottom were the signatures of 7 board members, a majority. Arnold's face went pale. "How did you—" "While you and Dex were focused on intimidating me, I was speaking with board members about my concerns regarding the Westlake acquisition. They were particularly interested in how such significant valuation issues could have been missed or ignored." "This is a coup," Dex sputtered. "No, it's corporate governance," I corrected. "Something this company has been lacking under your family's leadership." Arnold studied the letter again. "This meeting, what's the agenda?" "Reconsideration of the executive leadership structure in light of recent events," I quoted from memory, "and review of certain corporate governance concerns raised by major shareholders." The realization of what was happening finally dawned on Dex's face. "You played us?" he whispered. "The whole time. You let us think this was about getting you a seat at the table for one deal." "When it was actually about the table itself," I confirmed. "Yes." Arnold slumped into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 67 years. "Why not just vote your shares? You have enough to force changes." "Because I wanted the board to reach these conclusions independently, to see for themselves the problems with how this company has been managed." At 4 p.m. sharp, the boardroom filled again, this time with every board member, each looking somber and determined. I sat quietly at the back while the chairman called the meeting to order. What followed was as clinical as it was devastating. The board methodically reviewed the Westlake situation, questioning Dex in particular about oversight failures. They examined patterns of decision-making that prioritized speed over diligence, relationships over qualifications. Then came the vote. By 5:17 p.m., Arnold had been transitioned to Chairman Emeritus, a ceremonial role with no operational authority. Dex had been removed from all executive positions, though retained as a strategic advisor reporting to the new leadership team. And I had been named Interim Chief Strategy Officer while an executive search was conducted for a permanent CEO. As the meeting adjourned, Dex approached me, his expression a mixture of rage and bewilderment. "How long have you been planning this?" he demanded. "Since the day you took credit for my risk assessment model," I answered honestly. That was when I realized that as long as the Woods family controlled this company, true merit would never be recognized. "So that's what this was? Revenge for wounded pride?" "No, Dex. This was about building something better than what your family created. Something that rewards excellence rather than birthright." He shook his head slowly. "You won't last. You don't have the connections, the relationships that built this place." "You're right," I acknowledged. "I don't have your connections, but I have something more valuable, the respect of the people who actually do the work here." As if on cue, Mira appeared at the doorway, accompanied by department heads from across the company. People who had watched silently for years as talent was overlooked in favor of nepotism. People who had received my quietly circulated analyses over the past year, documenting how the company's performance had suffered under entitled leadership. Dex looked from them to me, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened. "My house," he said suddenly. "You mentioned buying it when the price drops." "Did I?" I smiled. "That was just a metaphor, Dex. I have no interest in your house. My apartment suits me perfectly." "Then what do you want?" You've taken my job, my reputation, my future here. I want exactly what I've always wanted, for this company to recognize and reward actual ability, for it to become a place where someone like me can succeed without having to orchestrate a boardroom coup. His face hardened. You think this is the end? My family still owns 22% of this company. True, but the board now understands the difference between ownership and leadership, between inheriting power and earning it. As he turned to leave, I called after him. By the way, Dex, your threat about irregularities in my investment accounts? My attorneys have already addressed those concerns with the SEC. Turns out they were quite interested in who might have attempted to tamper with those records. The color drained from his face. You can't prove anything. I don't need to. The investigation will do that. I smiled, not unkindly. Perhaps you should speak with the general counsel. I hear he's taking meetings all afternoon. 3 weeks later, the company announced its permanent leadership structure. I declined the CEO position, preferring to remain as Chief Strategy Officer, where my analytical skills could be best utilized. The Westlake acquisition closed successfully under the revised terms, saving the company hundreds of millions while still giving Westlake fair value and upside potential. Dex resigned from his advisory role after the SEC opened a formal investigation into potential securities violations. Arnold retreated to his vacation home in the islands, issuing a press release about pursuing new opportunities. And me? I finally bought a new car. Nothing flashy, just newer and more reliable than my old sedan. I stayed in my East Side apartment, though I did upgrade to a slightly larger unit in the same building. I continued bringing lunch from home most days, investing the majority of my increased salary just as I always had, because it was never about the mansions or the yachts or the status symbols. It was about creating a company where excellence matters more than last names, where people like me, who notice things others miss, who work while others boast, who build while others spend, can thrive on their own terms. Oh, and that house Dex was so proud of? It did go on the market 6 months later, selling for 30% below his purchase price. I didn't buy it, but Gilbert Hayes did, after I introduced him to my real estate agent. Some revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reconstruction, building something better from the ruins of what deserved to fall. If you've made it to the end of this story, you might be wondering if there's a lesson here. Maybe it's about patience or strategy, or the quiet power of observation. Or maybe it's simply that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one they should fear the most. Either way, if this journey of calculated revenge satisfied something in you, hit that subscribe button. Because understanding how power really works and how it can change hands when you least expect it is a story worth following.